Yes, sir.
Yay, we're going to start. Welcome, everybody. I'll call this meeting of the City of San Clemente Planning Commission to order for Wednesday, September 4th. We're meeting at 5 p.m. in the City Council chambers here at the City Hall in San Clemente. Present is Commissioner Prescott Loeffler and Commissioner Scott Camp, as well as you are Chair Pro Tem Camp, and then Cameron is here, and then missing or absent at this time, we have Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Crandall, and Vice Chair McCacken. With that, call to order, I'll ask Commissioner McCann to please lead us in the pledge tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining in the pledge. And we're going to move on with our regular meeting agenda. Item 4 is special order of business or special presentation. We have none tonight. That takes us to agenda number 5, which is our meeting minutes from August 21st, 2024. And that is in our packet. Did everyone get a chance to take a look at it? Are there any changes, corrections, comments on the minutes?
Make a
Commissioner-
motion to approve. Excuse me, there was a comment?
No, I didn't hear any comments. Did you have a comment, Scott, on the meeting minutes?
Just wanted to second her motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the August 21st, 2024 Planning Commission meeting minutes from Commissioner Prescott Loeffler and seconded by Commissioner McCann. Is there any discussion? None? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it passes 4-0. Thank you for that. Okay. Item 6 is oral communications from any member of the audience that wants to address the Planning Commission on any non-agenda item. Do we have any member of the audience wishing to have public comments tonight, off agenda? Okay. Seeing none, item 7 is consent calendar, and that is, and let me introduce that item. Vacancy rate certification for condominium conversions. That is the only item on our consent calendar. Does anyone want to pull it and have Mr. Wright talk to us, or what do you guys want to do?
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, so the consent calendar's been motion for approval and seconded by Commissioner McCann and seconded by Chair Pro Tem Camp. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve this consent? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Thanks, Christopher. Have a nice night. Okay. Always good to see you. Appreciate you coming. Okay, bye. That takes us to item 8, public hearings. So we have a few tonight, and the first one is number A, and that one is for a Project 23-487 Shoreline Dental Master Sign Program. The staff is recommending that we continue this and to the meeting of September 4th. So, Jonathan, is that still the direction of the staff for this item tonight?
Just to clarify, continue it to the 18th.
The 18th. Very good. Okay. I will go ahead and move that this item be continued to our meeting on September 18th.
Second?
Okay, seconded by Chair Pro Tem Camp. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? It passes unanimous 4-0. Item, let's see, so that takes us to item B. And that is to, another recommendation to continue the conditional use permit 21-268. It's an AT&T wireless telecommunications facility. And Jonathan, you are recommending that should that be the 18th as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll go ahead and move, we continue item 8B, the CUP 21-268 to our meeting on September 18th.
I'll second.
Okay, second goes to Chair Pro Tem Camp. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, 4-0. And that takes us to item 8C, another public hearing with, I believe, another recommendation to continue. This is for the Housing Element Action Plan for establishing objective design standards. Jonathan, also continue this to the 18th?
Can I weigh in on that?
That is the staff recommendation, yes.
Okay. Commissioner McCann,
I'm not going to be here on the 18th, and I would,
this is important to
I
you.
would like to see this continued to the first meeting in October if possible. Does that create any noticing problems?
Well, there's other issues with that, too.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So if I just, on this item, it's a component of our housing element action plan, and we do need to complete this by the end of the year. So we need to confirm Planning Commission's recommendation for council before we move forward. I would say that at the 18th meeting, the plan is for the report to be continued. So there's still expected 2 public hearings with the Planning Commission before we move to council. So certainly, if you want to participate more than once, your colleagues can take that into consideration. But we aren't going to be looking for, the recommendation won't be to provide a recommendation to council at the next meeting.
So, yeah, you're saying it'll be a 2-agenda night. It will be the 18th and then the first meeting on October.
Correct. Well, one of the meetings in October would be where we would look for the recommendation from Planning Commission and then look at having that go to
Typically,
council.
when it's a 2-step like that, where the staff is giving their report, we're getting familiar with it, we're asking questions and giving comments, staff taking those back, and then coming back with a revised report for final decision.
Correct. Final decision still could incorporate recommended revisions.
That night.
Correct, at the second hearing as
Okay.
well.
What's your thoughts?
Oh, that's fine. Although at that second meeting, presumably, hopefully the expectation is that comments were received by commission at the first meeting, incorporated,
Yeah.
and then it's, not a whole lot more sausage making at that second meeting.
Yeah,
So-
would you be willing to meet with the staff prior to the meeting to get your comments incorporated? So we-
Yeah, so given that, I think as long, what I'd like to do is, if the document is available, which I believe it is in draft form, I can review it offline and communicate any comments, if I have any. I don't know
Yeah.
that I have any.
You had,
I had some before.
you had some before, and I thought, I was with you, and I thought those were excellent, so, yeah, I think if you could review it and get, Zach, your comments, and then you'll be in attendance for the final for October?
I should be, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
So,
could forward those to us as well, your comments.
Yeah, if you want us to read.
I would say best would be if you could forward those to me, and then I'll provide those to all of the commissioners, and we'll have a copy available to the public as well.
okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. So with all of that, I'm going to move that we continue the Housing Element Action Plan to establish objective design standards to our meeting on September 18th.
Second?
Seconded by Commissioner McCann. Is there any discussion? Everyone comfortable? All right, all those in agreement?
Aye.
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 Okay,
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
sure.
When would you ideally like to see those comments from me before the 18th meeting, I assume? Like, what would be your optimal?
I think part of it is they're on a deadline to get it to council, so they can get it, yeah.
So we would look at publishing the report by the 12th, So if you are able to provide that before that time, then we will add it or append it to the packet. If you aren't able to get it to us by the 12th, and it carries into that next week, the week of the 16th, then we can still forward that electronically. So it kind of comes down to whether you'd like it to be physically available with the packet.
Okay, ideally, yes, so,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, I know staff is mindful that this is a state mandated update to our housing element, and so they're trying to get it done and through the council and back to the state by the deadline. So I think that's the goal here. So normally, I think staff is always accommodating people's, schedule and so forth, but, okay. So that, item 8C, we've, a unanimous motion to continue that to the 18th. So that concludes that one, which takes us to the next public hearing on our agenda. It is item 8D. This is a public hearing for project 24-127, the Ole Hansen Beach Club private events held at 105 West Avenida Pico. And this is a request for a conditional use permit, 24-128, related to ongoing event operations at the city-owned facility at 105 West Avenida Pico. And this was brought to us before. This was continued to tonight. And with that, I believe, Jonathan, you are the staff member that's going to give us the staff report for this item. Before I call on you to do that, I want to open the public hearing. I also want to ask if anybody has any ex parte or, conflict of interest on this item. None? Okay. I had a meeting with one of the residents this evening for a few minutes to discuss their concerns, so I listened to those. So I'll mention that I did that today. Okay, so the process is Jonathan will give his staff report. If there's questions, we can ask them, but then we want to move to the applicant. The applicant is here. Lynn Wagner is representing the applicant. She'll have 10 minutes to make her presentation. We'll have questions perhaps for you. And then we're going to take public comment, and each member of the public gets 3 minutes. And then we'll give the applicant an opportunity, if they wish it, to respond to those public comments. And then we'll move into discussion. So that's the format. With that, Jonathan, thank you for doing the staff report tonight.
Thank you, Chair. In this presentation, there'll be a few slides that are repeated from the original public hearing, just to provide some context, and then we'll move into some new information and some revised conditions that staff has put together. So we'll go through those items. I won't linger too long on the repeated ones, but we can always go back to those if there's questions to address prior information. So the first slide here is just the project location, which shows the location here in North Beach. The blue area is that parking lot along with the beach club, and to the north in the purple is our casino and Miramar properties, and off to the right and south is the residential area, the brown being residential high and the orange being residential medium zone. The timeline, I won't touch on all of these points, but the key recent milestones include a contract that the council entered into in 2016 after the beach club was rehabilitated, and that was awarded through a public competitive process to 24 Carats. Within that contract was a reference to a CUP requirement, and for unknown reasons, the city and tenant did not go through that process, and that is why we are here today. The language in the lease referred to restrictions or governance of entertainment as the rationale for that CUP. This slide, which we can come back to if there are questions about what the lease specifically covers, addresses the areas that they are allowed to use on the property, as well as the times and days of use for that property. So since 2016, and especially post-COVID, there's been a number of complaints that the city has received, primarily related to noise. And so this list here references some of the complaints that have come in, which range from amplified speeches or DJ dance music to setup and tear down noise before or after events, live performances outdoors, and concerns about the noise ordinance being violated. The next slide here shows that location and the setting of the beach club and orientation towards residences on the left there. And those are the locations where the city has been receiving complaints from. The flow of events are typically ceremonial occurrences on the lawn, the west lawn in particular, so not in the foreground, but beyond, closer to the ocean, which transition into receptions on the second floor deck and interior spaces. And then finally, if there is a dance and DJ component, that would occur indoors. So prior to the first public hearing, there were already some engagements between the city and the tenant to try to address some of the concerns. And so some steps were taken at an earlier date, including requiring a standard DJ company as opposed to individual bridal parties booking their own independent one. Lockable windows on the second floor element, tint on windows to reduce some of the lighting and glare issues, keeping the east lawn open until an hour before events. That's the lawn area that's closer to the casino. And a transition for new bookings to only be have the option to have events until 10 p.m. as opposed to the 11 p.m. on certain nights that are permitted under the lease. And then finally, the city did install a speaker system for the interior and a portion of the exterior deck area. And yet there are still a number of things that the city has heard from neighbors that were points of concern, and some of them still are. This list goes back to the initial public hearing, so I'm going to just identify a couple of these, but we can always come back again. And so some of those asks were to prohibit the MC or DJ from encouraging yelling or cheering, to prohibit horns and drums and other instruments, to reduce speaker volume so that music and speeches cannot be heard from the residences, to discontinue any band or amplified activity outdoors at the beach club, et cetera. So the initial public hearing occurred June 26, 2024. Several neighbors provided comments, and within those, there was a theme of a request for a continuance to further review the conditions and discuss with staff and the tenant options there. So the Planning Commission did continue the item and asked that staff set up meetings with both the tenant and neighbors for the purpose of achieving additional consensus on operational conditions. So in the interim, there's a number of things that have happened. This goes through a few of those. And the first was a joint meeting at the Beach Club in July. So the tenant and a number of neighbors participated. There were some later Zoom meetings, but this first meeting was certainly the most well-attended meeting. We probably had in the range of 25 to 30 participants at that meeting. And so staff facilitated, but primarily just listened to concerns, recommendations, et cetera, took notes, and then following that, worked with the tenant and who provided a response to the comments that were raised during that meeting, which resulted in a first draft of modifications to the conditions. The neighbors requested a further continuance. This was originally on an agenda in August to allow for some more time to review that draft. And so staff did meet with them to review that, and additional revisions have been made since those meetings. Staff also has investigated some potential capital improvements. That's not directly under the purview of the commission, but information is provided here, and that could be something that you provide a recommendation to the council if you think that there are certain capital improvements that could be beneficial to this facility in the long term. And those are referenced here as well as in the report. You don't need to read this screen. It's just a visual to identify that in the Exhibit A, the version that's provided is a red line of the first version that you had, so you can clearly see which conditions were changed, modified, deleted, et cetera, from the original conditions that were provided at the June public hearing. Some of those notable modifications are referenced on this slide. For instance, condition 7.1 addresses the standard citation process. There's a footnote that references the fees that are standard fees for any citation within the city's process. Condition 7.12 addresses security and includes an increase to 3 as the standard security requirement for the venue as opposed to 2. Conditions 7.6 and 7.18 address the venue manager duties and require a dedicated phone, which would remain on site and be the same phone number regardless of the venue manager. And condition 7.19 specifies a certain speaker type for the lawn ceremonies as well as a specific microphone type for the officiant. And 7.27 requires installation of a permanent decibel reader on site that would have the capability of reporting on certain thresholds. So current status, there still have been some complaints received, including over the Labor Day weekend, this past weekend. 24 Carats did notify the city that the mounted speaker system was not working, so that did contribute to the complaints. They were not able to use the city's installed system over the weekend. We did have a site visit from the AV company that installed the system today to troubleshoot, and they did explain how to address that in the future and how to reset the system, so that shouldn't be an issue moving forward. The final speakers that were referenced in the initial public hearing, so the far west side deck did not have speakers previously. Those were just installed this week into the wall, but we have not yet had initiation of those speakers from the AV company. So our maintenance team ran the wiring, repatched the walls, so they look great, but now the AV team has to come back down now that those are set in place to get that connected into the main system. So we're looking for that in the next one, ideally this next week, but it's not set yet. And once that does occur, we'll be coordinating with the tenant another opportunity of calibrating the sound levels of that system. I will note that staff did receive some emails after the last weekend events. One neighbor did request a continuation. I don't know if that will come out as a public comment today, but just sharing that there was a request on that front. And this is the recommendation page. I'll read some of this because the type font is pretty small. In going through, again, there's a number of modifications, and I did catch some clerical elements that need to be updated, and there's one or two recommendations in addition to that. So the first is a recommendation to remove condition 7.20, which is duplicative and really better captured by condition 7.3. To modify condition 7.1 to strike her, his best judgment, and to strike property owners and from that condition. To complete condition 7.27, which was left as a hanging sentence there, completed with the words "within 1 business day of a request by the city." That's referring to provision of, or that the tenant needs to provide readings from that permanent installed instrument. I think that likely we'll have direct access to that, but that's kind of a catch-all in case we don't have direct access. And then finally, condition 7.35 would be an optional add for the commission if there's an interest in having like residual reporting on the success of implementing these conditions. That would be captured by 7.35, which states that the commission will receive reports on the implementation of this use permit for the remainder of 2024. And it also has a reference to section 1712.175 of the code, which always exists. We don't need a condition to have that, but it's a quick reference that identifies the procedure if any entitlement permits, including use permits, are not being managed well. If there's ongoing issues, that's the process for amendment or revocation of permits. And that wouldn't be handled by the planning commission. So you could make a recommendation, but that would go to the city council. So that's an optional add if you feel like you would like to continue to receive reports on how the implementation of the use permit is going. So that concludes the staff report. And of course, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. Commissioner Prescott-Loeffler, your turn on your mic. I'm thinking you want to ask Jonathan a question.
I have a question, Jonathan.
All right, you're recognized.
Thank you. Just one question. Since a lot of when you went back, there were some modifications made. Since those modifications have been made, have any citations been issued against the management?
I apologize. I did not grab a record of that information. I'll try to track that in the background and get you a response shortly.
Okay, thank you. I'm interested in that, so if you could do that, would be great. That's all I have.
Okay.
Chair, sorry. Since Commissioner Davis did walk in, can we see if he has any disclosures to make before we proceed?
Certainly, yeah. Welcome, Ms.
you.
Commissioner Davis. Good to have you. So with the question from our honorable city attorney is for the ex parte communication with any, outside the public hearing, have you had any communications on this matter with a member of the public or the applicant?
No.
All right. Very good, thank you. Okay, Chair Pro Tem Camp.
Yeah, a couple questions. Jonathan, you mentioned that there were some proposed or possible capital improvements tied to this. Can you put that up on the screen, what those were?
Yeah, can you pull up the presentation again? I can navigate once you have it up. No, it's under the PowerPoint. Okay, so one of the first one is currently captured within the conditions of approval as, at least as the starting point, as a requirement of the tenant. That's the installation of the permanent sound reader. What that would look like is the city owns the light poles in the lawn. We do not own the light poles on the sidewalk adjacent to the residences, so we wouldn't be able to use those. It would have to be installed on one of the light poles in the lawn. Our electrician would be able to do that installation. So the cost for that item, it's a blend of the hardware and software because there's reporting capabilities within that. And so 10,000 is pretty consistent amongst a few different models that we looked at. That would be one item. Another could be expansion of the speaker system. So the city has paid a little over $35,000 for speaker installations at the interior and the deck area of the building. There's no wiring currently that runs out to the lawn. And currently, there's not available options, at least with the AV company that we've been working with, to do any kind of like a Bluetooth routing through the sound limiter. So if there's an interest long-term in having everything route through the sound limiter, we would have to do hardwiring out through the lawn and installation of speakers, like permanent speakers out in the lawn area as well. So based off of our current recent experiences of the speakers and cabling and such, we'd probably be looking at another $40,000 to install ground-mounted and or wall-mounted, or a blend of those speakers that surround probably just the west side of the lawn. So it would potentially encompass the planter area that's in the middle of the walkway that goes up to the front doors of the beach club, along the building side, and then potentially in the ocean side planter area could be the location of installation there. That's what that item addresses. Another is glass or acrylic sound barriers. So I met an installer on site and we looked at opportunities there. That wouldn't be something to fully enclose the deck. It would just be on the side facing Boca de la Playa. So extending about 30 feet from either edge. And this is would address some custom fitting. So within the wood pergola component on the west deck, as well as, custom fits towards the beach club. Given the significance of the building, it would fit well, is what this quote. It wouldn't be a lower end glued to the railing by any means. So the benefit of something of that sort would be more related to like human noise. One of the complaints we've gotten over time is doors being propped or in and out of people in that area. So I think that the glass or acrylic could be beneficial for that component. And then finally, there was discussion of a established loading zone, and the costs vary within that component. So depending on whether we're looking at restriping, repainting of curb areas and processing a request through coastal, up to potentially redoing, cutting into landscape, redoing irrigation, and installing a permanent area that uses like the Ole Hansen pavers, could go up to 80,000. That's the upper end estimate there. So those are the four that we have looked at so far. If there's other thoughts from the commission, certainly we could investigate other things.
Okay, so I guess this leads me to my other question, which is this is a conditional use permit that's before us, and so we have the authority tonight to approve. This is not a recommendation that we're making to city council.
Yeah, so the use permit, you have the authority to approve. Capital improvement program items like expenditures don't fall within the purview of the commission. So it would be a different component of your action. So your action could be an action to approve a use permit and a separate recommendation to the city council to consider, for instance, a prioritization of that list. So you wouldn't be implementing or requiring those items per se, with the exception of potentially the decibel reader, which is, staff feels like there's a sufficient nexus to require that within the conditions of the use permit.
So is that the only one that's tied to condition?
Current,
That's
yes,
before us?
correct.
The lawn speakers weren't?
No,
Okay. All right, and so that's helpful because that gives me the scope of those. I had a couple other questions. On page 5 of our packet, the resolution exhibits 7.17 says the guest count may not exceed 200 for any event consistent with the original RFP. Any event with an expected attendance of 200, expected attendance of 200 shall require an additional fourth security personnel. So should that be an expected attendance exceeding 200?
so they wouldn't be permitted to have an event over 200. The thought with that condition is they don't regularly, from my conversations with the tenant, it's not common to have a max capacity event, but that condition essentially captures if you have a max capacity event, which is 200, that you do need to provide that fourth security person.
So if you have 198 people on the invite list, you don't have to provide the fourth?
I think that's an accurate statement as it's currently written, yeah.
Okay. Seems a little odd, but I'll see what my cohorts here have to say in the discussion. Do you have any idea what the code maximum is? Is that 200 by code? Because typically, based on the occupancy, you're limited. And I guess that another part to that question would be, there's different limits based on parking and then what the fire department allows. Or either of those, do you have an idea what those might be?
Not offhand, so rewinding to the 2016 RFP that the city published specified the 200 as the max capacity. So that's where that number is coming from.
Okay, and that's probably not all indoors. There's a portion of that at least that includes the deck and the lawn, I assume?
Correct. Typically, it's not all
So you're
within one
probably
room.
200 is pretty safe that it's within code, especially if it includes. Because there should be a posting on the indoor. Actually, on the deck too, most likely. I'm just talking here. All right, I had another question on 7.20. It says alcohol service and live entertainment for all events shall conclude by 10 PM. But on 7.3, I think that's the one that says that all of, let's see. One of the conditions, I think, said that the alcohol sale, maybe it's 7.4, should be concluded 30 minutes prior. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, it says that.
Can
It
you,
does say that on 7.3.
7.3, yeah.
Yeah, so those are not consistent. 7.20 should indicate either the 30 minutes or you need to take it away from 7.3, I guess, right?
yes, I agree. That was one of those quick items I ran through, is a recommendation.
you already did.
Yeah,
Okay.
to strike 7.20, because I believe that the full intent is captured by 7.3.
Okay, by 7.3, so you're going to strike 7.20.
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right, and then on 7.23, it talks about lockable window hardware. I'm assuming that that's not going to affect the safe egress of that room?
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner McCann?
Sure. What's a lavalier type microphone?
Yeah, good question. So that's a microphone that's not handheld and would be like mounted to the speaker. So the concern that has come up from some of the neighbors is that there's a variation, in particular from wedding guests who aren't used to public speaking, who will like hold it closer or further away, et cetera. And so to have it attached to them would be beneficial in keeping consistency in the level of volume.
Okay, assuming then they just don't hold it to each other and pass it around.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's what they're gonna do. What's the current term of the lease?
It runs through September 30th of 2026.
So our CUP would run concurrent with the lease?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. The city spent 35 grand on speakers. Was that recently?
Yes, this year.
Okay. And why did they do that?
Partially, well, for a couple of reasons. One, as a first step to address the primary concern, I would say at least going back to the spring, early summer window, the primary complaint that we were receiving was related to the music volume.
Okay.
And we recognize that typically the DJ setups would be, a single or maybe two primary speaker locations. So those individual locations would have to be turned up to a louder volume to broadcast. And so there's a lot of kind of sound pollution as opposed to dispersed speaker systems, reduce the need for as much volume at each speaker. And long-term, the city is planning to operate the facility. What the types of uses and events and activities is not yet known. But the city manager felt like that was a worthwhile investment into the city building for use long-term.
Okay, thank you. And does that current system have a sound limiter on it?
It does.
Okay. So staff feels like, because you have a list, kind of a laundry list of capital improvements that you were looking at to consider weighing in on. And you're saying that we can't condition the applicant to do that?
City is the applicant.
Well, the city's not issuing a CUP to itself. The operator, whatever you want to call him.
Could this, so the commission would have to find essentially that there's direct nexus in the item being conditioned and the scale of the condition. I would defer to the attorney to weigh in on whether there's, if there is interest in considering adding more of those items within the conditions.
Okay. So if we want to talk about it later, then we ask the city attorney later? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Piggyback on that one real quick.
Please.
So the last time we looked at this item, we evaluated a couple options for that loading. And you just have one sort of broad brush item on the capital improvements ranging from, was it 25 to 80,000 or something? Shouldn't we look more closely at that at this point if we're going to condition it? And are you prepared to discuss those?
I'm happy to discuss those. I visited the site and walked the site with our Parks Director. My understanding is that the current temporary loading area is working for both the neighbors and the tenant. So it's less of an urgent concern than when we first were discussing the item. But it is, the reason it's on the list is that there still is long-term benefit, and again, largely for the city, to have a clearly identified permanent loading area in the future.
Jonathan, could I take your time? Could you show me where the temporary loading is taking place on any of the photos here,
Sure, let me,
just so I understand?
Tamara, can you go back to presentation mode? Okay, so we can address a few of the places that have been discussed within this view. One is off view, but I can explain. So historically, the city, before turning over operations, used Boca de la Playa, which is to the left, so the street that ends in the cul-de-sac on the left, for loading and unloading. The end of the street is red curbed. It's not a designated fire lane within the city's traffic code, but it is a no parking area. And that was an area of regular complaint, given the proximity to the residences. So the tenant relocated and for a time was using curb adjacent locations within the parking lot. However, on a couple of occasions, the police were called with concerns about the width of passage where they were unloading. And so at that point, they were essentially in a rock and a hard place. And staff revisited the item with, the city engineer or traffic engineer and OCSD, who again reiterated that the cleanest location for them to park would be on Boca de la Playa. So the original public hearing, there was a condition within those drafts, and I think it's read or crossed off within the version you have that referenced a requirement to continue to use that spot. That continues to be problematic for the neighbors, and so they have communicated with the tenant, who has resumed using curb-adjacent locations within the parking lot, and they've come to a level of agreement to be cooperative in using that location. I have observed that some smaller vehicles will also use in the foreground here, like a small Sprinter van is able to back up in that location. So that's the best locational situation is what we see immediately in the foreground here. The long-term solution that we had looked at was potentially cutting into the lawn directly beyond the palm trees. This was a subject that came in conversations with the neighbors, and a couple of neighbors were opposed to that location and in removing turf at that location. The recommended alternatives from the neighbors have equal challenges on the city side. The first was an ask of, could we use the bank of parking that's just beyond the palm trees? That's ADA parking, and we wouldn't have a good opportunity to relocate those stalls, so those would need to remain. Another location that was proposed was down by, there's a trash enclosure behind the beach club, but the only path of travel is above a 15% grade over tile, so that would just really be problematic to transport any material over that sidewalk. So another location that could be feasible, but we haven't done a potential design yet at this state, would be looking at modifying the sidewalk that's against this elevation of the beach club. So right now it's kind of a meandering sidewalk. We could look at pushing that sidewalk in closer to the building, and where the sidewalk is now, cutting in more of a back, like a loading zone. So then you're looking at more of a hardscape for hardscape transition. I will say that there still is concerns from the neighbors on that as well, in that the back end, while it would be clear of parked vehicles, et cetera, the back end of the vehicle would be facing towards those residences. So they expressed some concern about that. The final option would be modifying these stalls that are in the foreground, removing the angle-in parking component, and having a vehicle pull essentially forward into what these stalls that we see here. So removing, for instance, 3 stalls and identifying that as a loading zone only for a certain period of time, and that the remaining period of time would be parallel parking open to the public. So that was a long-winded response, but maybe worthwhile to illustrate that there are challenges with any location in this area.
Thank you.
Can I piggyback on that? So did you describe the one that they're agreeable to that you've been using?
So the location that's been primarily used is what we don't see the drive aisle in this photo, but just to the right of the palm trees is the entry drive aisle, and up against the curb just before the ADA stalls begin is where some of the loading has been occurring. And then, as I mentioned, if it's a smaller vehicle, they've been doing some reverse angle-in parking.
Okay, thanks.
Do you have more questions? Okay. Brent, did you have some questions?
I have a couple of questions. Okay. Is there an option for them to renew their lease in 2026?
This was an item on a council agenda not long ago. The council already indicated that they don't intend to extend that lease.
Okay. So the capital improvements, can you go over, maybe you already did, about who is expected to fund those improvements? I know the 10,000, we're thinking that we want the tenant to have that expense. What about the other improvements that are on there?
So currently, those are not within the conditions. So the
Okay.
current thinking is that, and in particular, the drive aisle, as an example of one of those, would need to be designed. And so timeline-wise, it doesn't probably make sense for that to be something that's conditioned to the tenant, given the remaining term they have on their lease.
Yeah, so the 10th, if they're not going to have an option to renew, do we really expect them to pay $10,000? I'm not supportive of them outlaying that kind of money, whereas the city's gonna, sounds like we'll be operating this thing for, likely the next decade or more. It could be the city's best interest to put that in.
I don't think that's within our purview.
Yeah, I know, but it actually, conditioning that the tenant put it in might be in our purview.
That is, yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is, yeah. So also, after you do all this modification of the speakers and everything's perfect, right? Everything's dialed in. So are you going to do a test, say, at night when it's cold out and put these things to max capacity, the speakers, their volume, and then have a discussion with the neighbors? Because I don't know if it would be fair to do without a proper test and thumbs up by everybody. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. We did do a calibration initially with the interior and partial exterior speakers, along with code enforcement on site with decibel readers, and one of the neighbors allowed access to his property. So he was able to observe, and we were able to test from that property. We would look to do the same thing again this time. I'm certainly open to, when and how, and if there's recommendations on, what the commission thinks would be the best parameters of how that occurs. Similarly open to the public comment on that.
I just think it wouldn't be fair to the tenant to go through all this, and also the city, and do all this expenditure and time and effort, and then like, we gotta lock this in. We can't see it again for the same thing. It's either this is what it is, because it's limited. It's not like they're gonna have the opportunity to turn it any louder. But we gotta just say, this is what was agreed upon, and we gotta just move on. Do you agree with that? How do we do that?
Yeah, that's the goal by the city. I think in the interim, there was an exception made because the far west side didn't have any speakers. And that's where traditionally the bride and groom for wedding events are sitting, and they weren't able to hear events. So I think our goal would be, as much as possible, to remove any dials that can be changed for events.
Yep, okay. And then noise or lighting, I mean, I know noise is probably a bigger concern than lighting, but has lighting been a real I mean, I saw it on here. Is there, and they're supposed to be pointed downward, the lights.
Yeah.
But can we have them downward and away from windows? I mean, is lighting a big issue?
So the main complaints I've received on the front of lighting are related to the east deck. So that's the deck that's in the foreground of this image. And it sounds like from what I gather, because again, it's typically this is at night, so the neighbors can't always say exactly, like, it was this equipment that I saw. They just are seeing lighting. So it sounds like it's when there are photo booths on that east deck that's what has created an annoyance. So yes, we have also received complaints about lighting less than the noise.
So lighting not from inside, but from on that deck?
Predominantly related to like exterior.
Yeah, got it. Okay. And then, and as far as the the thought about the glass or the acrylic, it's a lot of money. So is there a way to do a test on the effectiveness of that before we spend that kind of money? Like, I'm thinking, you know, some kind of wall put up, like a quick little plywood or something, like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, conceivably.
I mean, if we're doing it for sound, that's what I'm getting at. Why, you know, I want, before we put in $80,000 or whatever it is, we want to make sure it is effective. Or then at least have the option to explain it is or is not, do we still want to move forward with it, you know? Not just a hope.
Yeah.
That's what I'm kind of getting at.
I hear what you're saying. I think one of the things we could look at doing is when we do the sound test for the final speaker component, that we can look at doing something comparable. Obviously, it won't be identical, like we're not going to install something, mount something permanent to the wall, but maybe have a temporary wall solution that would be similar that we slide in and see if there's noticeable improvement or not.
What was the height of that screen that was being proposed?
So it would be just above the height of the doorway on either side of the balcony. So the current balconies have, I think it's 42-inch high walls, and then it would be an additional, I believe it was 40 inches above that, so it would be cumulative about 80 inches.
Jonathan, I have a question about time. It looks like there's a lot of expenses to try to cut down the noise. And has the hours of operation been considered to reduce the hours from 10 o'clock to 9 o'clock? To see if that would mitigate some of the noise, the after noise, the backing up, the moving out?
Yeah, it's a good question that has been a topic of conversation amongst the neighbors and myself. The challenge there is going to be that the lease set specific times for event operations. The tenant has agreed to reduce the 11 p.m. end time, so there's a condition related to that, and they've actually already began implementing that, so they no longer offer that 11 p.m. end time. But there would be significant impacts upon the existing contracts over the next year of events that are expecting to run until 10 p.m.
Offset by all the expenses that we're looking at here to mitigate the sound issue and the crowd issue with the possibly new loading zone, the speakers, the screens. So I'm just trying to look at the cost measure. So you reduce it by 1 hour to allow for some peace in the neighborhood, so people could feasibly leave the property at least by 9:30, 10 o'clock, instead of 11:30, 12 o'clock. And then possibly you don't have to do all of these other things.
I think that would have to be handled as a recommendation by the commission to the council to consider approaching the tenant about an amendment to the lease, given that those are specified rights under the lease. I don't think that we would be in a good position to directly contravene the lease through the use permit.
Is it possible to write a condition that runs through the end of the lease and then takes effect? So for instance, we say 10 o'clock through the end of the lease and then 9 o'clock going forward, because this CUP is going to be a permanent, like Commissioner Davis says, it's dialed, right? So is that a possibility? I assume it is.
Well, so the CUP wouldn't be a permanent element, so cities don't typically grant themselves CUPs. This would be a governing document for a third party. If the city were managing this, then, you know, with these complaints, it would be directly a city staff member that's out there and making changes. That's not the current management situation there. So long-term, I think that our Parks and Rec Department will be operating the facility, and there will likely be substantial changes to the types and frequency of events that are occurring there that will address some of these comments that we've heard.
Okay, that makes sense.
Just on that point, Jonathan, does the CEP run with the land, though? Will it run on there, or will this expire at the end of the lease?
It will expire with the termination of the
Okay.
lease.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Scott?
I'm seeing 7.25 about photo booth. Any photo booth will occur on the west deck or indoors? Is it feeling that on the west deck it won't bother neighbors?
That is the feedback that I've received. So that, yes, that comes from conversations with neighbors, was a preference for the west deck to the east deck.
But are those conversations from neighbors that were near the east deck and now we're going to create a problem on the west deck?
Fair question.
I guess, okay, well, I'll bring it up in discussion. Are there any other, I didn't see any lighting-related conditions?
Just downward.
Okay, yeah, other temporary indoor lighting must be directed downward. Does it address outdoor lighting? I'm looking at 7.28.
No, that one is specifically intended to address interior lighting.
Do you, upon thinking about it, think that we need to address outdoor lighting or deck lighting? Based on, your experience relative to complaints and operations?
I think there hasn't been a cumulative concern with lighting outdoors other than the photo booths that I've received. We might hear differently through public comment, so that could be an opportunity to further expand that. But based off of what I've heard so far, I don't think that there's additional need.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next step here is to hear from the applicant. So we have Lynn Wagner representing the applicant, 24 Carats. Welcome.
Evening.
You have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. You can go ahead to the first page. So thank you so much for having me tonight. I want to start by saying that we were pleased to read in the staff report that the neighbors have noted the positive interactions that 24 Carats has had since the last public hearing, and just wanted to reiterate that we have already implemented many adjustments over the last 8 years to accommodate neighbors and city requests, many of which do contradict our lease. Oh, you can go to the first page, sorry. Our lease stipulations, and have created some costly investments already. As mentioned earlier, we minimize our lawn access. Per our lease, we are permitted to utilize the space exclusively for events, but we only limit it to 1 hour for a ceremony in that location. As mentioned, we now do an earlier end time, self-imposed 10 o'clock for those, and also in Jonathan's report on Tuesdays, we completely vacate the building and the property is for use for the city for yoga, painting, different classes as well. So we've chosen to do that independently. With comment and everything. A lot of the event-specific adjustments that we've already talked about, the required in-house DJ, we limit lighting, limit announcements. There's no pre-ceremony music, so when you typically go to a wedding, there's nice romantic music when you first walk in. We don't have any of that. They only have the music for when they walk down the aisle, during the ceremony, and when they walk back. So typically ceremonies are only about 15-30 minutes maximum. 15 minutes is pretty typical. There's no disco balls any longer permitted. We do have specific placement of photo booth recommendations, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. grand exit, which is typically for a ceremony, you exit into a car and everybody waves goodbye. We've now moved that completely inside, so nobody can go outside and have that cheering outside, which we had done previously. We no longer allow live bands, and there's no outdoor dancing, which we previously did. We've also financially contributed to tinting the windows. We added the window locks. We purchased decibel readers, walkie-talkies. We adjusted our staffing schedules to accommodate a later chair setup, which is about $13,000 annually to do that. Ceremony speaker system, a neighbor specified a certain speaker that they would like us to use for the ceremony. We purchased that, wireless transmitters, got that all set up. That was about $4,500 to invest in that. And per the last public comment, we have already preemptively added a third security guard as a good neighbor liaison for all events, and that costs us about $32,000 annually for that additional person for every single event. So we've been adjusting to these continual requests, and it's impacted our employees and our clients immensely. Several employees have quit or asked to move venues because of the constant pressure and changes. We spend hours of time communicating and consoling our clients when we make these changes and they're implemented, and we've lost at least $250,000 in revenue this year alone because clients have canceled due to these adjustments, as well as people specifically won't book because they can't do the grand entrance that they envisioned or do something that they would like. So it has directly impacted a lot of that, and we've been willing to do that to live cohabitantly with the neighbors. So I do have on the next page some specific point responses. So for 7.1, I just wanted to mention that I feel like cheering should be a reasonable expectation of the city when electing to lease an event space. While we don't encourage yelling, there must be consideration to the nature of weddings and events and non-amplified noises that would accompany such celebrations. 75% of the venue is outdoors, and so the city should have reasonably anticipated cheering or loud noises on the exterior when proposing and entering agreement with 24 Carats or any operator. We would like assurance that reasonable cheering, and I'm not talking about loud late night talking and things that would be unreasonable, but reasonable cheering and sounds of voices emanating from the property would not be deemed disruptive to neighbors. For 7.19, I just wanted to note again that we were granted that exclusive use of the lawn area in our original lease, as well as the entire lawn area Thursday through Sunday in our first amendment of the lease. With that said, we are agreeable to limit the ceremonies with amplified sound to 1 hour, but this does limit our revenue opportunities with non-wedding events like hosting a corporate picnic or something along those lines. 725, 24 Carats agreed to set photo booths on the west deck or inside if the guest count and layout for the event permits this placement. I have a diagram below, and you can see that we communicated that placing the photo booth on the west deck or inside, if we can do that, is if it's sometimes it's impossible to place it in there, and we can't agree to the condition as written. We suggested that if we cannot place the photo booth in these preferred locations, that we would place the photo booth on the east deck with a flash aiming over the pool and not against the rotunda wall, which was kicking back some light. This point kind of feels more appropriate as a policy of our operations than a condition of the permit, because it is hard to determine that line. To detail that, we received final confirmations on whether a client has a photo booth at our detailing meeting, which is about 60 days from the event date. So I can't give you an exact account, but about 50% of events do have photo booths, and I would say 25% of those 50 could be placed on the west deck or inside, but scenarios like having more than 10 guest tables on the west deck or their cake table in the rotunda space, as you can see from the diagram, there's just not space in there in order to host all those activities. Next page. 726, regarding the permanent speaker system, we are very much looking forward to the consistency of the permanent speaker system. Welcome it, are very happy with it. But with that, we've asked the city and Avidex to return to recalibrate the system since June. We found that once the 100 guests or so were in the property, the sound was absorbed and the original calibration was not sufficient. So to your point, kind of having that right testing space in order to find the best between the neighbors and ourselves and the city. We haven't received a date for that yet. Just this week, I assumed responsibility for those communications and have been pushing that along. We also said that we would cover the cost for that recalibration. We're also waiting the installation of the additional speakers, which are just confirmed today that they're in but not operational. As noted, with the crashing waves and trains, it's hard to hear the toast and other key moments where sound is critical. We've been using the supplemental speaker in the area until this is installed. We've pressed our eagerness and willingness to accommodate this condition with with the permanent speakers, but we will need those speaker desk, or those West Deck speakers, the additional ones installed in order to adhere by the CUP conditions. We attempted again to use just the permanent speaker system, but as Jonathan mentioned earlier, it wasn't operational. We couldn't get the system working, and we have yet to be given kind of a off hours, like after hours or weekend contact for that, and that will be crucial as we use this system. So I'm just asking that there is a note that we are either provided an after hour or weekend person to contact to navigate that system for the AV, because most of our events occur at those hours, and or some delineation of when we can use those supplemental speakers if that speaker system is down. That should be a very rare occurrence, but AV, there's always troubleshooting to deal with. As noted in the staff report, we do agree with the benefits of a mutually accessible decibel reader, but we disagree that 24 Karat should be the one responsible for the purchase and installation. Some points being, the system will only monitor and not mitigate the noise, and 24 Karat currently measures and records our decibel levels constantly, at least once an hour. We keep copious records that are available to the city or community at any time, and we feel like if the city wants to use a specific measuring tool, that this shouldn't be to the expense of 24 Karats and the tenant. Additionally, the city plans to continue to operate the Ole Hanson Beach Club as an event venue beyond our lease, and they'll need the monitoring decibel levels. 24 Karats has no use for the unit beyond the lease, particularly a wired and calibrated system for the Ole Hanson Beach Club. Additionally, we do have a meeting scheduled with the city manager on September 18th to discuss terminating our lease early, so this lease may be cut short by a year if all parties agree to the term. 24 Karats has been required to make unexpected financial contributions, and per the CUP, will continue to invest in adaptations like the lavalier microphones, continued security, set crews, and these investments were all outside our lease agreement and made to appease the neighbors in the city. The request for 24 Karats to now purchase a $10,000 device due to the city not having that proper equipment to monitor the decibel reading seems extreme for a landlord to ask a tenant. And then the last, point 33, again, understanding our lawn usage stated in our lease, we do agree not to set up chairs earlier than 10 a.m., but we would like some additional language added to account for events starting earlier in the day, like a brunch-style wedding, a wedding that is going to, they begin their ceremonies at 11, so we have to set up the chairs earlier. So we would like the condition edited as follows or similar, that for any events starting 4 p.m. or later, chairs and equipment on the lawn shall not be set up prior to 10 a.m. If an event begins before 4 p.m., earlier installation of equipment, including chairs, is permitted. So as we first expressed at the Planning Commission meeting in June and reiterated today, 24 Karats has adapted our contracted use of the facility while continuing to honor our lease agreement as an event venue operator for the city of San Clemente. If 24 Karats would have predicted the backlash and restrictions now imposed, we probably never would have submitted to the RFP or agreed to the lease terms. We hope that the Planning Commission sees our efforts in navigating the situation and that our responses are considered in the finalization of the CUP. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Can you stand by? I want to ask my colleagues if they have questions for you. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I've got. First of all, thanks for being flexible. You can come back. For being flexible and working with the city, especially since a lot of these items have been costly to you or to your company. So we do appreciate that, and we understand that put you in a difficult spot here. But with this presentation that you gave us, there's quite a few of these conditions that you're basically saying you're not accepting as written. Are the neighbors aware of that? I mean, was there a discussion with them about certain conditions not being acceptable?
It was not directly with the neighbors. I did speak with Jonathan about some of the nuances for certain things. Again, like the photo booths, when it was first first presented, we said we could absolutely move them, but I had always indicated that there are some layouts that we simply cannot do it in. So if that is the wish of the planning commission, that is implemented, then that is what it is, but it is gonna impact our clients and the event flow, as well as there is a concern, we mentioned fire capacities and things like that. There are certain areas where it would be hard to impact that, and then that would be either a conversation with the client to tell them they're not allowed to have that unit, or where we would put it and what it would disrupt. We do agree with most of them. I think there are just some slight tweaks or some additional language that we would like, but we are agreeable with all the conditions for the most part. There were just some moments that I just wanted to have considered.
Okay. And are you aware of any sort of a timeline to comply with these? That can't be immediate because there's things that need to be installed. I don't know, maybe that's a better question for you.
I had read that it's within 30 days of implementing, or with signatures, correct, or approval?
Yeah, typically, it's, that is the standard timeline for implementation, but in some cases with items on this list, for instance, that decibel reader that's been mentioned, if that were to remain in the condition is stated that that would be in collaboration with city staff to install. So obviously, it wouldn't be a violation of the condition if our electrician isn't able to install it until, next week, for instance. Those things would be certainly taken into account if there's an inability. The remaining items that aren't completed yet, the city staff has a role in those. So like the calibration of sound, will participate in that. The installation of the decibel reader, we would be involved in those items. And so the enforcement wouldn't occur until after city staff is able to support the implementation.
Okay, and test,
Correct.
I
Yeah.
assume. Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Prescott Loeffler?
Yes, Lynn, if you wouldn't mind just hanging in with us a little longer. So based on your presentation, along with my colleague here, I kind of agree. It's my impression that this just is not a good fit for your business model.
It has gotten to a point where it is making business difficult, and which is why we're having a conversation with the city manager in the coming weeks.
So to appease the residents that are right there, and to also, compromise with your business, I feel like maybe we're trying to put Kleenex back in the box here, and that maybe none of this is going to work for you, nor will it work for the neighbors. So I'm kind of reluctant to move forward based on your presentation, because it sounds like you have a list that are going to be costly items, and it's just not going to be, it's not a good working business model for you.
I apologize if it came off that way. I think I just wanted to reiterate the position that we've been put in, given that we were presented this opportunity and requested to operate this event venue under the stipulations of the lease, and it has changed so significantly over the years. We have adapted, and it has impacted our employees and our clients, and but we've been continuing to move forward with this. We have hundreds of weddings booked with contracts with clients, so we certainly don't want to rip this out to just say no. So there's certain elements just of those conditions that I was hoping to have some additional language or consideration of, not saying no to the conditions and the basis of the CUP, no.
So during your conversations with the neighbors, because I have heard this, I don't know the whole situation down there, but I have heard of the complaints. Do you think by some of your recommendations here that they would be agreeance with that, or is there really an area where there is no working?
No, I definitely think that there is areas working. Let me grab my. I think my main points that I just wanted to have considered was just that we do get many complaints of the cheering and just yelling, and there are moments in a wedding where the bride and groom come in and the guests cheer. And that is something that is out of our control to stop people from cheering in the moment of celebration. So that was in my point of 7.1, just to say there are some reasonable. I completely understand and I'm sympathetic. There shouldn't be people outside talking loudly late at night. That is not kind of the reasonable noise that I'm speaking of. It's more just reasonable moments during a wedding that the noise will be audible from the property. Was just, I wanted that as, there wasn't a change for that. I just wanted the communication that there should be a reasonable expectation of a certain amount of noise coming from a 75% outdoor venue. Point 19, I was just saying yes, but just wanted to mention that this does contradict our lease. The photo booth at 7.25, I was just communicating that there are some events that might not be an opportunity for us to move that. But again, if that is the wish of the commission, it's something that we would have to deal with, but I would wanted that considered, that this is going to be impactful to our clients. The 7.26, I'm simply asking for an after hours or weekend contact, and that those speakers are operational at the time that the CUP is implemented. So I'm not saying no to it. We were excited to use the speaker system. I'm hopeful that it'll alleviate a lot of concerns. But it's just hard to run a system that's based off of AV if it can quit and we can't talk to somebody until Monday morning. What are we going to do with that sound over the weekend? So that is all I'm considering, that if we can have an after hours contact, or if there needs to be a sub-stipulation of what we can do during those times. If it doesn't work and we can't get somebody out, can we identify that? That's all I'm asking for. And then again, we are more than happy for that mutually accessible decibel reader. We just don't feel like we should be financially responsible for it. So we are accepting of all of them. I just wanted to make the point of our stance on some of them.
Again, it just doesn't sound like a good fit for a business that runs weddings when you're next to residents and you have expectations of cheering and toasting and music to dance with. So I can see the challenges, and I can see that it doesn't quite fit in that venue. And I'm sorry that this has happened because you signed a lease and it's not a good fit for your business. Can you explain to me why you're using it in the daytime, though, during the week? You said that there's yogas coming back to the, I thought it was always open to
Oh, yes, the
residents.
pool area and everything is open, but the area designated in our lease for event space, which is the upstairs decks and clubhouse space, that was designated in our lease as our area to host events 7 days a week.
So it's all yours and nobody else can use that? I see.
Yeah, but on Tuesdays, we relinquished our use of the space back to the city as just a good neighbor, good favor.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Yep, jump in. You guys have questions?
So one of the conditions, I don't remember which one it was, talked about the, I think it was cheering, or, I don't think it said yelling, but cheering at the end of the event when, so that's going to occur indoors.
Yes, it's always indoors now, yes.
Okay, so you're okay with that one?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so you're just talking about cheering like early in the event?
Yeah,
During-
yeah, it's usually around like 5 o'clock. It's during like the toast and when the bride and groom come in after the ceremony into the dining hall. And they say, let me welcome, the
Right.
happy couple, and the guests all cheer. So, or after a toast, when people cheers to the toast. Those are the times where the cheering that I'm mentioning. We do still sometimes hear that is a nuisance, but that is an element that is hard for us to control.
Would it be too specific to set a timeline on cheering?
Yeah,
No. I'm saying like,
We've been to weddings, this is ridiculous.
let's say past 8 o'clock.
yeah. I would say 99.9% of the time it is. Most commonly, our ceremonies begin at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They go for about 30 minutes. The guests have a cocktail reception till about 6 o'clock. Then they're welcomed into typically the west deck to dine. They all sit down, the bride and groom or couple, then enter the room. And that is sometimes when we do hear the cheering. But that is the time too where the DJ is saying, let me introduce, and that is the time that is audible
Yeah,
to the neighbors.
I've been to some weddings.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, you probably, did we have a condition that limited all cheering to indoors? I can't remember. It seems like we did. You guys remember which?
Yeah, it's, I believe it is condition 7.29. The MC/DJ shall be advised in writing that they will not ask, encourage guests to yell. That is one of them. Which is, I think that's a different issue than the cheering, right? We've all been to weddings where the DJ amps up the audience and gets some chanting and all of that. But that's all moved indoors now, right? So that doesn't happen anymore. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say the most boisterous parts of the evening are inside during dancing, and we require dancing inside.
Right. So I think we've arrived at some kind of separation between the DJ facilitation of loud cheering and so forth. That's been mitigated by moving it indoors. Now this is the out on the patio where typically the evening meal is served, and that's when the wedding party's introduced, and that's when you get that one-time cheer.
Yeah, or a few times with toast,
Yeah.
so, yeah.
So I think, does that clear that up for
Well,
you?
no, the question is there a limitation on the outdoor?
The decibels, right?
No,
I mean, is that what the limitation?
no,
Yeah, there's not a specific condition currently related to cheering. Cameron pointed out the one that would be applicable, and then Ms. Wagner mentioned 7.1 that has general language about disruptive activities, and that's where her comment is related to. She would like to clarify on the record that those types of cheering activities wouldn't be considered as a disruptive activity.
okay.
Is there a way to address that as a condition, though? I mean, like,
Well, if you don't mention it, I think it's fine, right?
okay.
If they're okay with it. Now, I was more concerned about that end of evening one, which it sounds like you don't have a problem.
Yes, that's
With that one.
indoors. And I will say with the new speaker system, we have heard less on the dancing portion, and it is typically the exterior speakers, which are going to be corrected with the new West X speaker installation.
Okay, and on a different item, did you comment, or do you want to comment on the loading zone question? Are you okay with where it's being handled right now?
Yes, we're okay if the neighbors are okay. I do think Jonathan specified the limitations kind of each space. It does make a little bit of a tighter turn, so it's something we tell our staff to be careful of when loading up, but we are happy with it if the neighbors are happy with it.
Okay, so we don't really have to change that. It sounds like it's working. That's, okay.
All right, Commissioner McCann, and then we'll go to Commissioner Davis. So a few more questions if you don't mind, thanks.
In your presentation, you made a number of obvious accommodations and efforts to, have those all been made effectively in the last few months based on complaints, or were some of those implemented in
Yeah.
2017, 2018 in the early
Years
parts
ago.
of the?
Yes, yeah. Through the 8 years, we've implemented a number of different adaptations. I would say over the last 1 to 2 years, it's been the most impactful in terms of significant changes to the flow, which is why we've had to have more, we've had more cancellations and people upset with different variations of what we're doing. But we have adapted a number of things throughout the years, but the last 1 or 2 years, we've definitely made more significant ones.
Okay, on the photo booth issue, is it frequently like are we not talking about an enclosed photo booth?
Yeah, typically it's like more of a backdrop, and then you have props and you stand in front of it, or most often there isn't a prop at all. It is just they want to look at the beautiful ocean. That's the backdrop. So that is why we suggested on the east deck that the photos go over the pool area. We did have them shifted before that were against the rotunda, which I would understand bouncing off that white wall would then shoot back into the light of the neighbors. And so we're suggesting that if there is a photo booth that cannot be moved inside due to the capacity or clearance reasons, that we could still have it on the east deck, but just overlooking just the wall, so the flash just goes over to the pool.
Then we're talking about like a couple of pre-planted professional flashes.
Yeah, it's usually one flash, or a lot of them right now are just like an all-inclusive like box unit where it's digital and there's
Okay.
more of like a halo light around it
Okay.
than necessarily like a flash, but they vary based off of what type of photo booth somebody is
Okay,
using.
but what you're proposed, which sounds like hasn't always been implemented, is put it in a specific location, flash is directed to the north,
Yes,
not bouncing off the rotunda,
yes.
and you think that would resolve the issue?
Yes, that is new just from our last public hearing that we implemented based off of the feedback.
Do you, the flash, do you feel like the photo booth needs to be operational until the end of the event? Or if the photo booth ended, let's say at 9, but the event went till 10, would that create a problem for you, in your perception?
Less of a problem than telling them they couldn't have it at all. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
That's a good idea on that one. Okay, what's the earliest event, or what's the earliest you would want to have those daytime events to set up chairs? What's reasonable?
I will say it is far and few between, but we have one coming up next month where their reception is starting at noon and they're doing more of like a brunch style lunch. So, at that moment, we may still set up the chairs at 10. I just wanted to have it noted in there if there is a reason to have something earlier, or if there's a morning celebration of life and there's some type of reception before people come inside, something like that, that would necessitate it. I just thought it would be important to note it in there just in case there is an occasion. But I would say we have one brunch wedding in the next 6 months, 8 months. So it would be far and few between.
If on that event, if we said loading to not start before 8 AM on those issues, would that
yes,
be
that would be
acceptable?
sufficient, yes.
Okay.
Would 9 work?
Again, it would be a rare occurrence, but I would feel better with 8 just in case. But I'd have to look specifically on times coming
Because
up.
right now it's 10, correct?
Yes, it's self-imposed 10, yes.
Self-imposed. Yeah. Okay. Also, well, I guess this is a discussion for all of us, but I was thinking that if you cannot accommodate a photo booth on the east side and have to do it on the west side, I mean, we could discuss maybe a time limitation, but would it have, I guess is it the west side that?
West side is designated, the good east deck is the problem.
Okay, east deck. So east deck, so would there be a trigger that if you actually cannot accommodate, then it would be allowable with maybe certain other restrictions?
Yes.
But a number of attendees would maybe have to trigger that for that allowance to happen on the east side or not. But that's something we could discuss maybe amongst us. And then,
Can I actually speak to that
yeah.
for one moment?
Go ahead, I want.
So I asked that specific question about a guest count to my venue managers at property there. And she said 10 tables. And I said, okay, so should I say 100 guests? And she said, well, no, because sometimes people have 80 guests, but only 8 people at each table. So it's hard to say a number because sometimes it's their group based off of their family or who they're sitting with. So it really is the 10 tables. So if we're going to go off of something on the west deck, it would be 10 tables.
Got it, copy. Okay, that's it.
Okay? All right. If you could stand by, we may, I'm going to give you the opportunity to respond to any public comment.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks to members of our public for being patient as we go through our process in this public hearing tonight. I have 2 speaker cards from the members of the public. I'll call them one at a time for their opportunity to make their comments in the 3-minute time limit. The first speaker we have tonight is Catherine Golden, followed by Lois McNichol.
Well, I'd like to get some more time for all the people that aren't here and sent you emails, which I hope you read, all of you, from the other people that are very, very involved in this process. But have you read them? From Mr. Butler, especially? because I think you should pay attention to what Mr. Butler said. He could not be here tonight, and I think that we very much need a continuance again to work with Jonathan on the CUP, because it is not up to par once again at all. What is going on here is we, the neighbors, should not be policing, all right? That's not our job, and we have continually done this over and over and over again. There is no meat in this CUP the way it is right now. 24 Carats should be taking care of this, and they don't. Do you know how many emails I sent you over the weekend? Do any of you ever read anything? Okay?
This is not a Q&A. This is your opportunity to speak, and you have 1:56 left.
Okay, well, I'll keep talking about that then. All right, I sent one Thursday night, I sent one Friday night, I sent one Saturday night, and I sent one Sunday night. And I did it the week before. And also, Kevin on my street sent one on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. We had a DJ over there every single night that was revving up that crowd every single night. The screaming and yelling was, I don't even know what the decimal was, but it was outrageous. And this went on until 10 o'clock. There might have been some events that went until 11 o'clock. And the problem with the loading is not the actual loading itself. It's the people that are screaming and yelling while they're loading and having conversations. And, you know, the event is over. So the people that are working and loading are having lots of fun, having all kinds of conversations and yelling. And that, if they would just keep that down, that would really take care of the loading problem. So that's another thing that's easy to take care of. But this CUP does not have any meat in it, and that's what we need in here. And I urge you all to read Mr. Butler's email, because it explains it in detail. And we all would like another continuance so that we can get some of these points into the CUP. Anyone have any questions?
That's really not our format, I'm sorry. We just have to, we listen to your comments and then we'll go to the next
okay.
one. Yeah,
All right, thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you for your comments. Lois McNichol.
Hi, I was at that meeting in July, and so I was aware of everything that they talked about regarding the CUP and all the neighbors' concerns. But one of the concerns that I haven't heard addressed, either at the dais or by, I'm sorry, what was your name? Or by 24 Carats, is the one thing that I did hear is that it was not only what was happening at the wedding itself, what was happening after the wedding. Because people were getting drunk and they would stay outside and they would be partying on the lawns and they would be causing an uproar and be at that point causing a disturbance, which was one of the reasons why they wanted more security. And that's one of the reasons why they wanted the other security officer there to make sure that the guests, when the wedding was over, that they left and that they didn't sit outside on the lawns partying. So that was one of the things I did not hear addressed unless it was supposed to be addressed in that security element. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments tonight. Okay, that concludes our public comments, and I want to give Ms. Wagner the opportunity to respond to those comments.
I will respond to Ms. Nichols' comment about the security guard. The third security guard, in addition to the two others, one of their main responsibilities is to move everybody along off the lawn, out of the parking lot, completely off the property. So that was addressed with that third security guard. In regard to our staff talking, I will address that again with their management. That is something that it should be a swift 1 hour loadout with accommodations to the city, or to the neighbors, I'm sorry. So thank you.
Okay. Ms. Wagner, do you mind if I engage you for some follow-up based on the comments that were made? Do you work on site at this event?
No, I do not. I'm not there every day. I go and check in, and I'm there on occasion, but I am not the manager on
Not
site.
the on-site manager?
No.
Okay. With respect to the comments made by Mrs. Golden and the DJ revving the audience up,
Yes.
you had made reference earlier about simple cheering for the announcements.
Yes.
Can you speak to this claim that she's making, which I believe, because she has sent numerous emails, some video
Yes.
that's been captured from across the street that is actually validating her claims, that this actually happens. Can you talk to that? What is, we have in here that, you talk to the DJ in writing about the noise. Can you expand on what it is you communicate to them in writing?
Yeah, we talk about it at length, consistently and constantly. Following the last public hearing meeting and just going through the navigations of using the new speaker system, we were working collectively with them hand in hand to have a written processes for them that can then be double checked by management, things like this. This is a team in-house that we have worked with for years. And we did go with this in-house DJ so that we could have more control over the management of it. I will say there has been need for corrective measures because DJs in their beans are wanting to excite the crowd, and we've told them over anybody that has been not adhering to that this is something that it needs to be, the announcements need to be minimized, that we are calmly making certain announcements, and it isn't like a constant, let's give it all up for and yelling constantly for things. I think with the revving up, there has been struggle with kind of the perception of revving up versus kind of wedding standard norms in terms of when some corrective measures are made. Every time I'm the one receiving texts from the neighbors every evening, so while I'm not physically there, I get all their texts, I get all their videos, I get everything, and I am continuously sending that, communicating it to our on-site management team as well as the DJ. It is just involving management. And again, I think the biggest, the thing we have about the revving up is that perception of what is revving up yelling and what is more of a celebratory excitement for the couple and the wedding event. So that is where I've kind of struggled to make that line of what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it gets to sort of the heart of the issue here is all parties intend to do the right thing until you have an agent, in this case, a DJ who might be disconnected from those intents because they have a job to do, right? What is your recommendation on what could be done to provide more prescriptive guidance so that they understand when we're outdoors, we're interfacing with the public and we need to comply with noise standards or we're going to be fined and cited, and we need you to be accountable to that. And then when we move indoors, you can move to more of your DJ, but in the outside, you're more of an MC, and you have to be compliant with all of the noise ordinances.
Yeah.
How would you recommend that actually that would be implemented in a way that is prescriptive, and you know it's being followed, and you know that it would go to really heart of the matter of resolving a lot of the issues here? What's your recommendation for that?
Kind of twofold. I think that, while every ceremony is different based off of cultural backgrounds, personal preferences, things along those lines, there are kind of bucket activities that we can group in terms of different formalities and things like that we could designate. These are the only activities allowed outside versus what can be happen and what can be going inside. I know that on 2 recent occasions that it has been a concern of the guests being riled up. There were these kind of one-off situations that I agree that could have been better handled. One time, a guest had a magician. We've never had a magician at a wedding before, so he was doing tricks to the guests, and they were erupting given that. Another one, culturally, it was Asian wedding, and they did games at each of the tables, and that also encouraged more loud noises. And those both happened in the last couple weeks, so I think those are the ones that are being initiated, but those are far in between, and until they happen, it's sometimes hard for us to delineate. But now that if we do give these buckets of like, maybe there aren't any of these tableside games happening anymore, something along those lines that would encourage more cheering, we could limit certain announcements to the exterior and have certain things go to the exterior, but they would have to be kind of larger buckets, because it's hard to say.
So you're recommending to us tonight that maybe some prescriptive guidance on what could occur out on the patio and versus what can occur indoors is acceptable to you?
Yes, we could. I would say that it would impact
Helpful.
our clients, but we could do that.
Yeah. Do you meet with your clients, or is that the on-site venue? Who does that?
That's the on-site team. There's a 2-person team there that meets with the clients.
Okay. How well versed are they with our noise ordinances and all these particular issues? How well versed are they on that?
Extremely. It is, I've used the word before, but it is really hard, like dishearteningly so. Everybody cares so much about trying to make these, listening to it, adhering to that, and these moments where it goes into the inflection, it is hard for everybody, including the DJs. The DJs take it super impactfully too. It's something that everybody is super well versed. They all know their security team, security, everybody. But we're dealing with people at an event that, again, it's hard to control those eruptions and things like that we have no control over those 100 people making a noise.
Sounds like it just goes to planning. If the plan in advance is, hey, when we're in the patio, we're going to be in, the format here is serve the meal, make the introductions, make your toasts, and we're going to reserve anything that resembles celebration beyond those 2 items. Those are going to be moved indoors. So perhaps that kind of delineation would be helpful tonight.
Yes, but I will say that there is still the variable of some people's toasts and groups are going to be louder than others, and it's hard to indicate when
Sure.
one would be louder than the
Sure.
other.
Okay. Then regards to the loading and the conversations, who are those individuals that are doing the?
It's a 24-karat staffing team, and they have a manager on site that should be, and as well as a security guard is on site to monitor that as well. So that'll be a discussion. I know that I've heard the loud noises loading up. I haven't heard the complaint as much of them speaking. I've heard of the guests leaving and making noise, but it's something that I will address
So
with the
that's
management
new
team.
information to you.
Relatively, yes. I've heard general exiting commotion, but not specifically that our team is making too much noise
Okay.
with their voices as they load up.
Is it the same crew every weekend, or do you have staff that kind of, sometimes they go here, sometimes they go there, so it could be different people every time?
Yes, yes.
Okay. What's the training of those individuals with respect to venue protocols, and situations? What kind of training do you give these individuals?
Yes, they have to go through, it's weeks or a number of shifts of training that they have to go through in order to work at any of our venues before they're off on their own. In terms of an independent employee, they go through all the rules and regulations of the venues. It is also given in a staff meeting before the event begins. The event lead goes over all the rules, all the specifics with all the guests, all the staff that is there. So they are given it in paper writing, in training over weeks of time, as well as in person the day of the event.
Have you personally reviewed what is handed to them?
Yes, and I've
does that-
physically gone and listened to the staff meetings and the leads and listening to what they're doing. I've gone down and physically spoken to, we have one security guard who is there every single event, and he's the good neighbor policy enforcer, and he is the same gentleman every week. He does have a backup if he ever can't make it, but he's yet to not be able to make it. So we have him on site. He is well versed. I've met with him several times about all of these rules.
Perhaps he needs to supervise
Yeah.
the people unloading at 11 o'clock
Yeah.
at night that are shouting back and forth.
Which he is ultimately responsible to watch over for us, so I will.
Because that
speak in
does sound
general direction.
fairly basic,
Yeah.
that that's something that people should be able to not do.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if your onsite, to me, that's very basic if your onsite manager isn't standing right there immediately correcting that behavior.
Absolutely.
So I think the heart of the issue is if it continues to occur, that basic disruption that's easily managed, and yet it's not. What's your recommendation for how we ought to resolve that?
Yeah, I hear the crux of the concern. I think that, again, not experiencing that specific moment directly myself, as well as hearing that that was a concern before, it isn't something I've been able to address directly with the team and discuss why it is so loud during that time. I don't know if it's just the voices carrying heavy when it's quiet other than them over to the neighbors, or if they are actually being more boisterous. But it's something that I can talk to them about.
But you
what it
yourself
is.
have not had followed up yet with the on-site team about this issue. Is that what
I
I'm hearing?
just heard from the first time this evening that,
Right.
that the voices are a
Gotcha.
concern, so
Okay.
no, I have not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any other follow-ups for the applicant? All right. Ms. Magner, thank you.
I
But
have-
if you
I have
could
one.
stand by,
I have
we
one.
may want to interact, continue. In fact, we have one right now with Scott McCann wants to speak with you
Just
one
real
more
quick,
time.
you said venues. How many venues do you guys operate?
24 Carats operates 6 venues throughout Southern California, and we
Okay.
are the exclusive venue caterer at 8.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to move us into discussion, but I do want to be able to call on staff and the applicant until we kind of have, I think, a consensus on our direction. Then I want to close the public hearing. Is that okay with everybody? So I want to lead off, I would like someone to lead off the discussion. The hearing's open, so if we want to involve the applicant and staff, we can do that.
I'll lead off.
All right. Commissioner
Jonathan,
Prescott Loeffler wants to lead off. Thank you.
Did we get any update on if there was any violations or citations issued?
Yeah, I took a look at our system online. There's been 2 citations issued in May, 1 in June, and there's kind of an open case for ongoing site visits. So there have not been recent citations issued, but staff is in currently a regular rhythm of visiting the site to investigate and take readings.
And the purpose of that was due to the complaints?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So based on what I've been reading and catching up here as far as Ms. Lynn's sharing with us, she's mentioned there's the cheering, the groups, the games, hard to control. There's definitely lack of management. There might be perception, interpretation. It doesn't fit. We can see that having these loud celebrations, and people should be celebrating, that's what celebrations are about, does not fit in that footprint when you're right next to all of those homes. I don't know that I could feel comfortable forcing them into a CUP without further figuring this out, because there's so many unanswered questions on this. The hard to control kind of gets it to me. We could tighten this up as much as you want, but there is still no control of human beings celebrating at 10 o'clock at night with alcohol in a neighborhood. Unless you have constant security. So I can't write that in at this time, and I'm just not ready to move forward with this. So those are my comments, and convince me otherwise.
I'm not trying to convince you otherwise, but I would say the city signed a lease with them that they can have events.
Yes.
And I think what she said is very reasonable, which is, hey, 75% of the space is outdoors. And, we knew they were going to have events. Human celebration does seem like a logical, expectation here. So,
But But there's no control. Expectation, but there still needs to be some control. And the control mechanisms that have already been put in place are not working.
Well, it seems to me that, and I really don't want to quote unquote have an argument with you about it, but it seems to me that
It'll be fine.
the, I don't know what to call her, the operator, you know, that they have made and are more recently going to make a lot more efforts to comply with kind of, and they've voluntarily done things to limit hours and things like that, that are outside of the scope of their lease. And we have CUP that's adding layers of stuff on here, including extra security. I mean, at some point, there's noise codes, and we have code enforcement, and we have cops, and cops get calls all the time about things. So it seems like at some point we need to, and maybe we're not ready to, maybe there's too many unanswered questions or whatever. But I think this is a good effort towards, sounds to me like they've made a good effort at trying to accommodate, to some extent, within reason. If you think it should go farther, that's one thing. And we're putting more teeth into this, and requesting extra security. My impression would be, if code enforcement's been out there on a regular basis because of the complaints, and yet there's not a lot of repetitive sightings, because you said they've been out there with decibel readers, is that correct, Jonathan?
That's correct.
So, probably if they were out there and getting high readings, my guess is that there would be citations issued, and yet there hasn't been.
I can speak to that if you'd
Okay,
like.
please do.
I disclosed this at the first hearing that I did go to the facility. And I met with Mr. Butler on site while the event was going on. And the nature of it, and actually a code compliance gentleman was pulled in, got out, had the meter, was there maybe 5 minutes, and then left. The situation that I observed is, it is event noise, and, you know, you can go, it's just timing. So if if the code compliance officer arrives while they're eating dinner, and there's no announcements, there's no toast, and he's there for his 5 minutes, it's all good.
Sure.
If he's there for that 5 minutes or that 10-minute period where they're doing the announcements and so forth, he might have there might be a different outcome. So a lot of it's timing. And I feel that from what I heard from Mr. Butler was that it's not the 1 or 2 times, it's the 4 nights a week. And the repetitive nature of it over 4 nights, and it's not always predictable. It's not, weddings start at they might start at different times, so sometimes it's early, sometimes it's later. And then you do have the one-off situations, as Ms. Wagner indicated. It all accumulates over time. I think it's very difficult for code compliance, unless they're parked there, to actually be there at the right time, at the right, and capture that on their instrument and then take an action. So I think we really have a situation where if we're looking at metrics, they may not tell the story. So that would be how I would respond to that. But you have the floor if you want to keep going with your comments. I'd like, for you to.
Sure,
please.
sure. I mean, I'm sympathetic to the neighbors, but I'm sympathetic to the operator as well. They, city signed a lease with them to run events. That's what they're doing. I think they know they're under the magnifying glass now. And I think that city enforcement's going to be, tighter on them and a lot more people looking. Regarding, just touching on a random array of the things that have been brought up, one of the things was us getting ongoing reports of the future performance or whatever. I personally don't want to get ongoing reports. If there's a problem, then I assume it's going to coming back to us, but I don't need to know what happens on a weekly or monthly basis there unless there's a problem. There was the fourth person at the 200-person attendance, that struck me as odd. Seems to me maybe we should have a fourth person, 150 guests, 150 plus guests. And maybe that's like RFCPs, and if 5 people didn't show up and it drops to 148, they've already committed the fourth person. I think maybe we should have a condition about guests leaving at the end of the event. Because I can easily see where, lingering around and they're drunk and loud and stuff. So trying to encourage people, it sounds like they're doing that, but to the extent that we can, have a condition around that, I think would be good. I think that on condition 7.28, instead of just saying the indoor lighting should be directed downward, I think it should say all lighting should be directed downward.
Which one number is that?
7.28.
Okay.
And I think that the photo booth, her photo booth recommendation to me makes sense. So we should say if there's more than 10 tables on the west deck, then the photo booth is allowed to be on the east deck. But in all cases, all flash lighting has to be directed away from Bolka. And the photo booth ends at 9 PM. Regarding us prioritizing capital improvements, I don't want to do that. I don't think we should. I don't think we should condition them to do it. And if it seems like some of the stuff, like, create a loading zone, that doesn't seem to me to be a problem, or be, that's not going to solve a problem. I don't want to put glass or acrylic panels on a historic building. I don't remember what the other ones were, but I wasn't in favor of, seems to me they have, a somewhat limited time left on their lease. They're going to, play out the clock, run out the clock. I agreed that I don't think they should have to put in a decibel reading device that's permanent. Let's see if I have anything else. I think that's it. So that's where I stand.
Okay, let's move on down to Commissioner Davis, get his thoughts, and I'd like to get yours, Steve, and then I'll give some, and then we'll see where we're at.
Jonathan, so the decibel monitoring device for $10,000, we already talked about, if it should be the 10 or not or whatever, but is that thing monitor 24/7?
Yes, it would.
So if it has a spike, you'll know? So we're not relying on that moment of time anymore. Then we could actually talk true facts. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, so maybe that is a worthwhile expenditure of 10K. And then when the city takes it over, it'll be valuable to the city as well for similar situations, or we'll be able to analyze data much more. Okay, so anyway, here's a thought on that. Photo booth, if it does end up on the east side, triggered by 10 tables or whatever, maybe they could put a matte black or some non-reflective material behind it, so when it does flash, it doesn't reflect. I presume there's something like that. And then I was thinking maybe you could put some poles up around it, like a 10-foot height, black curtain, to keep it from also going out. Yeah, contain it. So those are just some quick thoughts that happen on that. Extra security is a cost directly to 24 Karat. And I think if we maybe have somebody dedicated to getting all the attendees moving on out, and we have the other one dedicated to making sure all the people loading up aren't too yelling at whoever to help or get this, or I can see how that could happen, especially that late at night when everything's dead silent and it's cold out and noise is traveling. I mean, we could hear neighbors, at night. So we could do, now the early setup, I don't know, if 10 o'clock self-imposed has been working thus far, I don't know if you need it early or not. I'd like to hear other people on that one. They have about 2 years left on their lease, but they're having a meeting with the city manager to reduce that to 1 year. So like talking about the shot clock running out, I mean, let's minimize let's do the best for the neighbors that we possibly can with respect to the tenant. You know, they still have to be operational and pay their bills. We still want their, you know, I'm sure the city's still expecting them to pay their rent. You know, so my heart goes out to these guys. As an entrepreneur, that's all I know is business. And I feel for these guys. I couldn't imagine. They want to, I'm sure if it was up to them, they'd run this 20 years. But we're putting so much pressure on them because of, you know, warranted noise, and I wouldn't want to live next to that. I get it. So let's try to figure out how to run this thing down. And then I have another couple things. Okay, leaving it, all lighting downward, I think that's a great idea, inside or outside, fabulous. You know, then all the other capital improvements, let the city, when the city takes it over, they make the decisions based on their needs. You know, so there's my 10 comments.
All right, thank you for those. Vice Chair Pro Tem Camp. Sorry, your title's too long for me.
I think it's incumbent on us to come up with, I understand it's not a good fit, but it is,
But it is
it is
there.
what it is.
It is there, it's not a good fit.
So, you know, we need to come up with something that we can approve here. I mean, I think tonight, if we can, because we could just keep continuing it. I like what I'm hearing from Commissioner Davis and McCann. I think those are some good solutions that aren't outrageous. It seems like the issue really, obviously it's noise, right, primarily. The lighting, that's easier to tackle. This is a public venue, right? It's a public facility. North Beach is a public facility. It closes at 10, right, the beach. You got the train, you got the railroad there, you got the train noise. Even, you know, on an outdoor lawn at night, people are out there until 10, right? They're out there making noise. So it seems like, to me, the issue is really this setup, not setup, but the tear down. And, you know, the existing, I don't know if there's a way that we can say the decibel readers, they get set up at closing time, right, when this thing is up. And that's when, you know, we've added, is it one security guard or all three that have been added?
There were 2 traditionally, and they've added a 3rd.
Okay, so it's not a giant property. So 3 security guards can, that's why they call it triangulate. They can triangulate this property, I think, pretty well. And if they're specifically directed to monitor the sound, especially at the end, and get people moving out, you know, you don't want to be rude, but at the same time, people are aware it's going to shut down at 10 o'clock. Your main job is to keep people quiet at 10 and to move people off-site. You know, it's like when you go to church, you got to move, got to get somebody else in that parking place, right? So, you know, the loading zone location, it sounds like we're okay. I think we're okay with where it is. It's really a matter of those people, the staff members that are doing these activities being monitored and being directed and being shut down, right? They're, you know, I'm not sure that we have enough that specifies in the conditions right now about that closing time, right? To me, that's the biggest deal, because the whole beach is open until 10. I've been, you know, you guys know I go to bed pretty early, but I've been down there, and it's noisy, you know, and then the train goes by, so there's the spikes that they're, you know, that they're talking about.
Well, it's the noise right, I'm sorry. It's the noise directly across from their homes.
Right.
here, there, there. It's not consistent. It's, now you think you're going back to sleep, but now you hear this, and this is gonna wake you up. So that, it is a difficult fit. I keep saying that. So, but I want to.
No, I agree.
I want you to continue.
But I also want us to be, cognizant of the fact that this is a public venue. And even without a wedding, there's going to be noise out there, to some degree. The wedding is what we're specifically talking about. I don't know what other events the city is going to be holding there. But really, the wedding
Yeah,
is
weddings.
the noisiest thing. So I think there's some good conditions in place here now to allow us to approve this thing here tonight. I like what I'm hearing from the other commissioners. And I think that, over the years, obviously, a lot of these have been placed on the operator or the tenant, but they can go a little bit further and beef things up in terms of those key issues. I think, Cameron mentioned that really the heart of the issue is this noise, especially at the end. And so that's what we really need to focus on here tonight. That's, I may have more, but that's.
Okay, thanks. Let me try and bring this home with just some thoughts for Jonathan and Commissioner Prescott Loeffler. Jonathan, you had said we could make recommendations to the council and the city manager tonight as well, right? Not just do a CUP. We can go outside of that, make recommendations.
You're welcome to, and those will be captured both by the minutes and then internally as a staff communication.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask Karen if you would give some thought to a paragraph that we could send a recommendation to the city manager and city council that after our public hearings, we're finding that there is some incompatibilities with the use that the city entered into a lease, impacting the neighbors, and our CUP is doing our best, but they can't fully mitigate the impact. It's just not compatible, and they need to consider this in the future, and they need to consider other, potentially the discussions with the operator about an early termination to the lease. Something like that, if you want to give that some thought, so we could
I like that.
amplify your concerns?
Can you answer, or someone answer for me, 4 days a week? Is it 10 o'clock every night, 4 days a week, including Sundays, that they are running weddings? And
Give me one moment to verify the hours and I'll
Yeah,
respond.
they have, as Ms. Wagner said, they have the facility control over it to rent it out 7 days a week.
7 days a
But
week?
when I was on site and talked to Mr. Butler, he told me it's normally Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so it's normally 4. There can be other nights, but the main run is 4 nights a
So
week.
it's,
Right.
Can I add on that real quick?
Mm-hmm,
My understanding from the staff report is that their lease says they can operate events till 11 PM. They've self-imposed 10 PM, except for about 6 to 12 weddings that they already have signed contracts for to go to 11.
Correct, it's in the
But-
appendix.
But for those ones, they're self-imposing 10 PM right
Yeah,
now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7
7.
that they're grandfathering in the self-imposed 10 PM limit. Okay, so I'd like to put that in motion, with you, and ask you to think about that, so when we do a motion, you could include that. The next thing is, I think a lot of this does come down, and I don't mean to say you're not doing your job, Ms. Wagner. It just does come down to on-site management and their ability to implement the restrictions and to hold the staff accountable and to manage them correctly, and to, whether it's training or whether it's just on-site supervision, something's lacking there. It's not, there's something lacking in the execution of the management. And so I'm open to your suggestions, but what I want to get across to you tonight is we need serious management on site where DJs are fully instructed in writing and face-to-face, hey, when you're operating this and when you're outdoors, the amplified sound needs to be kept at a certain level and not exceeded. Would you be open to agreeing to, if we lock down the volume control on the amplification so that they can't turn it up because it's noisy, the ambient noise is too loud, and they want to get over the sound of the train, over the sound of the waves. Maybe it's a high tide and it's noisy, and he wants to get over that and be heard. Kind of like, would you be open to one level only?
Yes, we've already agreed to that.
My-
We absolutely want that, yes.
My impression
Okay.
is that's already being done with the new city speaker system.
I think that there's access by the DJ to the volume, and they can manually manipulate it.
Oh, okay.
That's my understanding.
Only currently because that area in the west deck doesn't have those speakers installed, but Mr. Lightfoot was mentioning earlier that they will be maybe wired up in the next couple weeks here, so we'll be able to utilize those. But we are moving forward, we are not going to use any additional speakers. We're only going to use the in-house speaker system. And
Okay.
we know some of our clients are going to be disappointed in previous interactions. They've requested refunds, they're not happy. We're just doing that even until that system gets up, just to alleviate this
Jonathan,
whatsoever.
what is the timeline to finish that installation?
So the heavy lifting is done. So now it's just the wiring connection by the AV company that we've been working with. Lynn and I have both been on those communications. So we don't have a day yet
Okay.
set for that installation, but I'm expecting that to be in the next 1 to 2 weeks.
Okay, and then will the sound level be locked so that it can't be changed?
Yes, so on the second floor where the majority of activities occur, the noise limiter is not something that the tenant would have access to. And so, yes, that component is locked. The component that wouldn't be locked by that is activities on the lawn. That is not connected to the noise limiter.
Okay, all right. So that's good news, I think, that's going to be locked. Jonathan, I think Ms. Wagner does have a very valid point that she is dependent on the city for that to operate. And if it's Saturday night at 7 and it's not working, they need it working. They need someone on call that can go and remedy that. What's the position of the staff on that?
Yeah, I think that for the most part, we can address that through the next calibration meeting that we have with Avidex. It actually was a fairly simple fix this past time, but given that it is a new system, we and really Lynn's team just didn't know yet what that simple fix was.
Okay.
So I think we can work with them to we've already addressed that item, but when we have them on site, address any other potential quick fix issues, and have a conversation about, whether whether they can be available after hours or whether it makes sense for additional training, for them to provide additional training so that either someone on Lynn's team or someone that handles weekend coverage by city staff can.
Probably both.
Yeah. Can
Because I
handle
think if
that.
it doesn't work, then the DJ has to plan B. And he's like, I've got speakers and equipment in my van, I'm gonna go get it, and all of a sudden it's at a whole nother level. So we've gotta we can't have that. So I think both, on-site staff and then also the 24 karat staff, because you do have a on-site manager that's consistent from week to week, right? And that person could be trained on that system and be the troubleshooter?
Yes, there's a team of 2 there to cover the 7 days a week, but
Okay.
they're both at a management level to oversee those
And they're
things,
there,
absolutely.
that's their permanent location, they're not
Yes.
rotated? All right. I don't know that we need a condition for that, I just want to make sure we have an understanding. And I'm open to this, but I just want to, again, I don't know if we need a condition, I think it's an understanding, but maybe there's a way to make it memorialized here. When it's on the patio, we are minimizing the amplified sound, we're minimizing the noise. We need the DJ to understand that, we need the management to train them over, and if that gets out of hand, they need to stop it. And then when they move inside, then they can do the DJ thing, where they're getting people excited and all that. I think that's really the framework that we have established, right? If when they're on the patio, it's mellow, it's dinner. Yes, they're gonna make the announcements, but we're not going, we're trying to keep that minimal, and then when they go inside for the dancing, all the rest, they can do their DJ thing.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Or piggyback on that?
Please, help me out with,
I don't know if this is being done or not, but it'd be great if they, when they're making announcements, and maybe have signs posted around to say, hey, please be courteous to the neighbors, please keep the
yes, I was
noise
gonna,
down.
yes.
Because even just some signs around the west deck, I mean, not everyone's going to agree to that, but some people will be sensitive to that, and some, people, could be elbowing their husband, hey, keep it down, there's neighbors around.
I think the condition I'm thinking of right now, and would you please be thinking about this, is to direct the applicant to create documentation for the DJ and the on-site management staff that would, something along the lines of, will instruct them to keep the patio announcements and amplified sound to within city sound limits and to a minimum, and also to make announcements towards the end of the evening as people start to leave and it starts to wind down, to actually specifically tell the audience, you're in a neighborhood, please leave orderly, please leave quietly, please just go to your cars, no conversations, no loud noise, no partying, our security is here, we will escort you out if you need help. But something to that effect, I think in the condition, would just be to direct you to create those instructions and have it reviewed by the neighbors, have it reviewed by Mr. Lightfoot, and then that would be reviewed by the on-site manager with the DJ at the beginning of every event. Is that acceptable to you? Yes. Okay. Hopefully that will be acceptable to my colleagues.
Well, yeah, and I'm thinking just even a few, kind of signs or maybe table placards that are on the tables, there'd be a little bit of peer pressure. And again, not everybody's going to, obey that, especially when they're drinking. But there could be some kind of peer pressure from others to say, hey, yeah, we do need to be sensitive to the neighbors. It's just kind of an awareness thing. Like, they're probably not thinking about, hey, they're happy because Jill and Jimmy are getting married. They aren't thinking about, hey, it is late and there's neighbors nearby. That's all.
And isn't there a condition that talks about they have to be approved DJs? Has that already been implemented?
They've stopped using various DJs and now they have one in-house DJ.
Okay. So that,
It's several people, but one DJ company.
One DJ company, right,
okay, so there's training going on there.
right.
And these.
Could we have the company listed so that we know that that's the one that's supposed to be there? I mean, can't we have that in this?
There's only one company, I guess, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you could
Yes,
go to
it's
the
one
microphone
company.
and,
Yes, it's one company, and I can give you the name of the company. It's,
Yeah, they might want to change company. It's just they have one committed, yeah.
this is why I want to have it in writing, and then it's going to be the duty of the on-site manager to review this with the DJ before every event, even though she goes, oh, it's Tom again. I know, Tom, I know you know this because we talk about it, the farther times that you're here, but I have to do it again.
Yeah, and they sign
And
off,
I'm going to
yeah.
actually request that those instructions get initialed or signed by both the DJ and the on-site manager every event, that they
That's
were
just fine.
discussed, signed, dated, as, just because it's good management to get this process down.
Yeah.
And I'm just uncomfortable with the management so far, it seems hit and miss. And so I want to get consistency.
yes.
And I think this process, if it's in writing, required that, and I'll ask you to develop it and then implement that.
There should be
Yes.
circumstances, because you can do all that, but then if there's a repeat offender, what is?
Well, that's the next question for staff. This, is the enforcement, right? There
Enforcement's
is,
in here.
well, okay,
It's 100, 200, 500. And I think we.
what's 100, 200, 500, what is that?
Fines. There's fines in there for infractions within the same year, is that right? And
Jonathan, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so that's not a special condition. That's referencing the standard city fine schedule for violations
Right.
that occur. But that
Karen
is,
was asking how many of those have been issued, and he's like, probably,
2 in May, And one, right, is this 2 in May and 1 in June?
Correct.
And none since June. And I think we're getting into the overreach. We're talking to them about how to manage their
Yeah.
company. We just tell them, this is what has to happen,
Yep.
and then we fine them. We're going too far. We're telling them how to manage their company now.
I think it's important that we lay down expectations that this has to be followed.
We could say the expectations. They could figure out how to do it.
What I'm hearing from the
I hope.
residents is that's not been happening
It's not working.
for years.
Well, then,
Well, I do think that, sorry to interrupt.
go ahead. No, you're right.
I do think that, and I don't want to sound critical, but I do think that, you know, there's a new focus and interest on getting this right, and they're aware of that. But creating conditions about the level of specificity, that who has to initial what page before every event, that seems like it's.
I can leave that out, but I feel like we need to be really clear that this needs to be done. Okay. Jonathan, as far as capital equipment, are you recommending this, or are you just asking us to consider it?
No, it's not a specific recommendation. It was topics that had come up in conversations with
Okay,
the
gotcha.
neighbors.
Okay.
And so I wanted to share like those different things that had been explored.
I think the city's done with the speakers is good, and if we want to get the noise monitoring, I think the city ought to pay for that. But beyond that, I don't really think we need to be doing capital expenditures.
I agree.
Yeah.
The chair's 10 o'clock.
I'm fine with the 10 o'clock, keeping that at 10 o'clock. I'm fine with the comments that Mr. McCann made about, or Davis, about the photo booth. I think that's fine.
Can I add one thing? that
Yeah.
we didn't discuss earlier? So she had requested that where they do have a brunch event or something, that they be allowed to set up earlier than 10 a.m., I think we say, but no earlier than 8 a.m. or something.
Well, what does she need? What do you,
She said 8 a.m. was fine, but she balked at 9 a.m.
Yeah,
And it sounds like it's not a regular problem anyway.
I think it was a
8 a.m.
noon. You start at noon? Is that the soonest you start, is it noon?
I'll have to check that specific event. I do know it is a brunch event. Again, I think there's one in the next 8 months, but there is going to be one. So I just didn't want to look like we weren't adhering to the CUP by not mentioning that. And because we do have the use of the lawn per our lease, I was asking
Yeah.
if there could be a deviation that if something starts before a certain time, we can have the chairs set up earlier.
well, in that case, we want the noise control for setup. Especially if it's like a Sunday brunch. If they're out there at 8 o'clock,
I think, yeah, I
you
mean,
know, we need that same security monitoring. Which, would that be, I mean, you're not gonna have 3
There would be a
security-
manager on site monitoring the setup.
There will be,
Yes.
okay.
my fear is if we move it from 10 to 8, then that becomes
Okay.
regular.
Standard. That's fine.
I'd rather keep it at 10, and if you have an existing event on the books, let Jonathan know. And we can make the exception for that.
Okay, I'll
But
submit
no,
for that.
I don't want to do it in the future. I want to keep it to 10.
All right.
Ms. Wagner, while you're up there, can I ask you a quick question? Would it be completely out of reach to look at your Sunday's events and have them end at 9 o'clock at night? Because it's a Sunday night.
It is something that we could look at for contracts moving forward. But for booked events, those are our contract, like we have our contract with city, but then we also have contracts with them saying that they can't go to 10 o'clock. So that would be breaking those contracts.
It's,
Again,
the next day is a work day.
Just to go forward, on a go-forward
On
basis.
a go for it, the next day is a work day. And so by the time you all get out of there and the noise is down, it's 11 o'clock at night. I mean, let's just be realistic.
We
It's
could look
11
at-
o'clock at night.
we're open to new bookings, monitoring it till 9 o'clock.
I would recommend all bookings going forward would be 9 o'clock. I'm turning into 8 o'clock Steve here. But, I mean, that would be my recommendation, but I'm willing to compromise. But, I mean, I think going forward, because I don't think this is a good fit, and I feel bad for the business, and I feel bad for the neighbors, that 9 o'clock would solve a lot of the issues going forward.
You mean for Sunday night?
Well, I would like every night, but if you could get me Sunday, I would be,
I think she agreed to Sunday.
Yeah, she
Sunday for
sounded like,
contracts moving forward,
she
yes.
was
yeah.
on go forward at 9, and she sounded like she was willing to do that. Again, remember, the city signed a lease with them
I
until 11.
know it, I
so-
know it, I
Okay.
know it.
Do we have any other conversation we want to involve the applicant or Jonathan? Do we feel like we're at a point where we can put together a motion? Is that, do you feel?
I think so.
All right. Jonathan, any last comments you want to give us?
No?
Okay, I'm
I
gonna,
will take notes as you start to work through your
Okay.
motions.
Think about the noise monitoring decibel.
great. I'm going to close the public hearing, and I'm going to turn to my colleagues and ask if somebody could take maybe kind of summarize something that could be turned into a motion? Who wants to be brave and do that?
Take a stab at it, and
Commissioner McCann.
please chime in with other,
Yeah, this is not a motion, this is just a discussion about what a proposed motion would look like. Let's formulate it. Once we get it formulated and there's sort of a consensus on it, then let's convert it. Is that,
who's going to take notes on this? Staff? Okay.
and I will take notes also.
So I would,
Understanding that this is not a compatible venue.
Yeah, that's going to be in the motion, and you're going to read that. So that's stipulated.
okay.
And I hope everyone will support that.
I don't necessarily support that, but, I mean, because it depends on the operation.
Yeah.
Operational.
And if we need to, we
So-
can make that a separate motion. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it hasn't been compatible, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be compatible. So that's where I, you know. But anyway, what I would propose is, if it's not already in there, something about guests are leaving at 10 and encouraged to exit the site, not just get to the lawn and then hang out till 11.
Right, that's security
So
specifically.
I don't know if that's already in the conditions of approval or not, but something to that effect. Security is, continuing to usher them out.
So it could say completely off-site.
No, you can't end it then and offside.
No. By a certain,
Well, you got a dedicated, security guard ushering them out.
It's hard to have the event end at 10 and then
I'm not
everyone
suggesting
off.
people are gone immediately,
Yeah,
but there
Dedication,
being
one of the
that-
security guards is
they're continuously pushing
herding
them
the
out.
cats.
Yeah. I think that the condition about a fourth, I don't know if we think that 3 security guards is enough if you have 180 people. I don't know. But I think having a fourth person at the 200th person with a maximum of 200, I think that's just dumb. So if we need a fourth person, they should kick in sometime before the 200th person.
I think with 3, that's not a huge property, you can still,
Okay, so you
Right,
think
yeah,
3's
I
think
enough?
3's good.
Okay, so I recommend that we delete the condition about adding a fourth person with 200 people.
200.
Is that even a condition? Oh,
It's in there somewhere.
7.17.
So 199, you're good with 3.
Yeah, exactly,
Max is out at 200, you get the triggers for it.
exactly. We revised 7.28 to say all lighting is directed downward.
All.
So we delete the word indoor, I guess. The photo booth language of, which one is it?
725.
725 be revised to say if there are more than 10 occupied tables on the west deck, if it's less than 10 occupied tables, the photo booth needs to be on the west deck. If it's more than,
Is allowed to be on the west deck.
no, it
or
must be
east-
on the
yeah,
west
yeah,
deck.
sorry.
If it's 11 or more occupied tables, it can move to the east deck, but it ends at 9 PM, and all lighting is directed away from, I think it's Della Boca in front, and not bouncing off the rotunda.
So with some screening behind it,
With,
non-reflective.
yeah, sure, with some black screening behind it.
Possibly, yeah, I mean.
Okay. I think there's a condition in here that they have to buy a $10,000 decibel reader. Is that right, Jonathan? So I would propose to strike that condition, whichever one that is.
that's 7.27.
Okay, so strike 7.27. What about, in the back of the pamphlet, there's a proposed sign, which was exactly what I was talking about.
That's pretty good.
Where does this, where is this proposed to be used? Okay, so that's 7.30. Sign shall be posted at the northeast patio and stairway. Okay. Okay, and I'd love to see those on the tables too.
That's a good
Small-
idea.
Small version, just a little on the tables.
Are you thinking for earlier in the like dinner tables, or are you thinking like if there are cocktail tables that are set up after dinner?
Well,
Just
I'm thinking if the problem is noise generating coming off the decks, the outdoor decks, and probably the later it goes, that's more offensive on the noise problem. So I don't know if they're cocktail tables, I don't know if they're dining tables, I don't know if they're dancing tables.
Okay.
What about
Whatever
if
they
we
are.
said multiple signs at conspicuous locations? Because the tables, stuff gets
Okay,
moved, right?
okay, great.
So it's not, because this appears it's just one sign, right? Is that,
Yeah, it's one sign. They currently posted at 3 locations. So on the west deck near the stairs, and I believe down at the bottom of the stairs as well. But what I'm hearing is there's also an interest in having some signage on the west deck where the dining type activities are occurring.
I'm assuming that there's tables with 8 to 10 people at them, and they're sitting around talking late into the night and having drinks and getting louder and louder. And if there's a couple small these on the table, like a little placard, like it's just reminding people that, hey, and it's not gonna work for everybody, but it's reminding people. And other people will be like, hey, keep it down, Johnny, whatever.
it could be almost overkill, I think, with the signs, is what we're looking for. Put them any place where you think it's gonna be noticeable. And we can give the staff, I think, some leeway. We could end up with 6, 7 signs, I think, in conspicuous locations where they won't just be tossed or removed or laid flat or whatever.
So I like the word multiple signs in conspicuous locations, to be approved by staff.
Yeah,
Yeah, with respect to the property, right?
yeah, it's
Signs,
a historic,
signs, yeah.
Yeah, so what did I miss on the other items that we discussed? That would be the framework for
One
what,
security guard to monitor the cleanup,
okay,
or, the noise control at the 10 o'clock, cleanup. We're talking
Yeah.
about one security guard to monitor that, and one security guard to monitor everybody kind of leaving. Though that's probably the 2 key points of the security guards
it's a good
after,
idea.
yeah.
So two security guards specifically monitor those items. I like that.
yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
Okay, so we're basically directing the applicant to have the security oversee their employees who are doing the tear down.
Well, it's probably contract employees, right? Like, hey, we hired
I'm fine with
ABC
it, but I
Party
just want to be
Rentals.
clear that that's what you're saying. I'm fine with that.
Well, because it sounds like that's not happening now.
I agree, and that's why I would like also the applicant to be directed to create written instructions for on-site management to review with the DJ our noise ordinance, and with direction to keep the noise at a minimum on the patio, and make announcements at closing or near closing to exit quietly.
Yeah, okay, I agree with that in that.
So Jonathan, can you capture that one, so when we do a motion, we can ask you for it, how that would work? And we can incorporate, then the security would also be, should be available to monitor both exiting attendees and as well as the tear down.
Yep.
Is that something that you can fashion into a new condition?
Yes, I'll work on that.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I'm a little torn on deleting the 4th security guard. If they feel like they're getting at the 200 point, they want to have it, I'd let them have it. I don't think we need to tell them you don't have to do
We're
it.
not telling them that they can't have 4 or 20
Okay.
security guards.
You're just not mandating
The way
it.
it's written right now, it says, basically, if you have 200 guests,
It's a
you have
shall.
to have a 4th. security guard, you shall have.
Okay.
But the maximum is 200 guests, so,
At 199, you only have to have 3.
exactly.
Okay.
It's
Exactly.
not reasonable.
All right.
Should be triggered at 180 if it's required.
Or
something
150.
like
We're
that.
keeping this,
Yeah.
we're keeping the,
It's a huge expense, though. I agree, 3 is probably solid.
Yeah.
okay, I think,
There's probably only a few people that make most of the noise.
Right. Uncle Joe.
Exactly.
I think we have everything. The only thing I would like to discuss is the enforcement, because there is reference in here that the police department can, at their discretion, close the event down. I don't think that needs to be in the, let's leave it in there, but they're gonna, if they need to close it down, they're gonna close it down, that regardless of what this says. What I think is more of a city issue is there should be some oversight by the city that this is a hot spot. And I think we should probably have, I don't know how that would work, Jonathan, if it's a request to the compliance office to, you know, monitor this and pay, you know, with interest that, you know, we've got a lot of complaints and we want to make sure that, and make them aware of us, you know, that they have about these conditions, and see if they can do a good job of enforcing it. I don't know, I just think we need to give the residents assurance that it's not forgotten about, that the city will have an ongoing presence to do code enforcement, and maybe even have the rangers go by at closing time and just keep people moving and all that. I mean, I don't know what we can do to have better enforcement. That's typically been a sore spot for the residents, and we're not an enforcement group, but how do we encourage that?
Like, we can put it on the record.
Yeah, maybe it's part of the recommendation we put to the city council and city manager that, you know, increased attention with code enforcement and park rangers to help enforce this is a good idea. Maybe we do it that way.
That's a good idea. I like that.
Okay,
I forgot one thing, which was on a go-forward basis, new contracts for Sunday evenings have
9
events
PM.
end at 9 PM.
9 PM. Okay, very good. I think we have the basis of a motion.
Well, let me ask you about the enforcement and all that. So I think it's all about the noise, right? If the city spends $10,000 and installs this decibel monitor there that is monitored and recording information 24/7, long run, are we gonna save money rather than sending a ranger, an enforcement, and putting all this energy? And then it's left up to human error when we do that. Or if
See where you're going,
somebody,
but I don't agree with that, because I think it's more after the fact. When you have the ranger on site, you're proactive and you're preventing and you're managing it in real time. Who's gonna monitor that? Who's gonna read that? And you've got motorcycles going by, you've got the train going by, all of that's gonna trigger that monitor, and you're not gonna know what triggered it. I think it's useful to an extent, but on-site enforcement is the key.
yeah, but I just don't think it's actually gonna happen. Because I believe that it's just like you're tasking police to do X amount, right? Your resources are thin, who's gonna put in the effort, and just so, I don't know the answer. I just, you know, if I got a bunch of employees, I'm gonna put them where they need to be more than where, you know, planning commission suggests.
Yeah, we've asked Ms. Wagner to do that, but I think we need to have, the city needs to follow up. So,
Yeah,
and
I'm just trying to figure out the best way.
so we're
to
gonna
do
add that to our recommendations, that they provide more focus and more attention on the noise events on the weekends there at those hours, and let them do their job.
Just weekends,
Well, that's when they do it. Mainly it's Thursday through Sunday.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, 4 days.
This is my weekend. What's your?
Did you have a different idea of a weekend? That's okay, never mind.
I do.
Okay,
Tired, it's Monday through Sunday for this guy.
Monday through Sunday.
so Jonathan, can you maybe repeat back what you've got, and then maybe we can see if we can grab that into a motion? And then
Sure.
Karen, I'm gonna ask you to read yours afterwards. Okay, Jonathan,
Give me one moment to make one other
okay,
modification.
Karen, do you have yours ready? Why don't-
have it ready.
You wanna read it while Jonathan's?
I'll spitball it out and you guys can fix it.
Okay, hit your mic if you don't mind.
Oh,
Thanks.
where's AI when I need it? With the understanding that the current venue's operation is not compatible with the adjacent neighborhood, additional recommendations are being made to mitigate the noise events. That's what I have so far. Is that too much or not enough?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry.
With the understanding that the current venue's operation is not compatible with the adjacent neighborhood, that additional recommendations are being made to mitigate the noise events, or just mitigate the noise.
Well, that's what we're doing, but I think what you were conveying is that we wanted to encourage the city council and the city manager to
To-
be open to pursuing an early conclusion to this lease.
Okay, to be open, I can just put, and to be open. Okay, so with the understanding that the current venue's operation is not compatible with the adjacent neighborhood, and that additional recommendations were being made to mitigate the noise level, that the city council and city manager,
Yes, be open to
city manager,
early conclusion of the lease.
open to early
Because
conclusion.
Ms. Wagner already indicated that they're gonna have that discussion, and I think to support her, to support you, we wanna send that along.
Okay.
I'll put in there that they already have a meeting on calendar so that they're aware of it, right? You know?
Sure,
So it doesn't get to them after the meeting is a point.
okay. Jonathan, did you need more time, or where you at?
Just a moment, yes, please.
Talks amongst yourselves.
My notes are, like everyone else is just covering all these pages, so. Normally, I kind of have them organized and I can do it myself, but I'm going to ask Jonathan for his help tonight.
We're not going to criticize you for that.
Because I think we started with the 17.17.
So with regard to her reluctance on a couple of those conditions, did we include that?
Yeah, we took care of the booth, and she asked for the timing of the 10 a.m. start time, which we denied that one, or whatever. And the photo booth on the east side, we adjusted. And can you bring up the slide to make sure there's not something we're missing there?
Well, I
Well,
think
it was hers, yeah, it was hers.
Talked about cheering, but
Cheering, that's right.
We kind of.
we did
Okay,
have,
there's nothing else?
We didn't-
Thank you for
Okay.
bringing
Yeah.
that up,
All
yeah.
right, so we got,
Well, she wanted an after-hours contact, and we encouraged,
Yeah,
Jonathan, to
training,
get
I
that.
guess, training.
yeah.
I think there was a slide that you had, Jonathan, of some staff recommendations to this set of conditions, so we may want to put that on screen right now as well.
Sure, Tamara, if you want to pull that up. I do have those included within this list that I'll run through.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay,
So the first two are related to comments that I had on my recommendation slide. One of them overlaps with a direction that the commission's giving. So in addition to the adopting the resolution, it's with modifications to the following conditions. One, to remove her best judgment and property owners from condition 7.1, which clarifies that the responsibility is on the tenant for this permit. Remove condition 7.20, which was duplicative of 7.3, but to expand 7.3 to add, tenant shall limit future bookings for Sundays to conclude at 9 p.m. with loadout concluding by 10 p.m.
which one was that, Jonathan?
This is 7.3,
Gotcha,
so
okay.
augmenting 7.3, which already addresses the times of events. Tenant shall submit to the city an exhibit of existing booked events that will be exempted from this condition regarding Sunday times. Remove condition remove from condition 7.17 the second sentence, which states any event with an expected attendance of 200 shall require an additional for security personnel. Modify 7.28 to clarify that all lighting indoor and outdoor shall be directed downward. Modify 7.25 to additionally state that if more than 10 tables are required for an event, then a photo booth may be located on the east deck. However, the booth must be oriented away from the residences on Boca de la Playa with screening used behind any flashing elements. Strike condition 7.27, which addressed the permanent decibel reader. Augment condition 7.30 related to signage to add additional quiet please signs to the east deck during the reception.
To be multiple and conspicuous.
Sure.
Can we add that?
Augment condition 7.12, which addresses all of the responsibilities of security guards with a new bullet point that states assign a security guard to monitor quiet exiting of guests and assign one security guard to monitor quiet loadout. Add a new condition 7.35 stating that the venue manager shall review the standards of the CUP and best management practices with the DJ prior to all events. And add a condition 7.36 stating the on-site manager or DJ will announce the end of the event over the internal speakers, and security will then assist with ushering guests out of the venue.
Can we say, and encourage the orderly departure of guests?
Comma, encouraging the orderly departure of guests.
Perfect.
Noted.
Okay.
I wanna bring something up there. Can you all help me clean up where it says behind, when talking about photo booth? We're talking about screening behind flashing elements. What's that mean? I mean, I know what it means,
You
but,
mean, you want to reduce the reflective surface?
Say no lighting reflectivity towards,
well, so can you read that again, please?
Yeah. The full portion was if more than 10 tables are required for an event, then a photo booth may be located on the east deck booth. However, the booth must be oriented away from the residences on Boca de la Playa with screening used behind any flashing components.
Behind any flashing, what's behind? So flashing, non-reflect, the flash has to go into non-reflective material, if that makes sense, right? So here's the flash. I don't know if behind is this way or behind is this way.
Right.
So is behind and the flash is going this way? Or is behind?
You're asking
The
that the
people.
flash is already,
you
that
could
the,
just say any light being directed towards the residence.
So here's how it goes, right? You got the thing, and you got the white wall, and you got the flash, and it's reflecting off that white wall into the residence. So you need to have the non-reflective surface, or,
cover.
covering the white wall, essentially. You know what I mean? That's what it's
Or
about.
we could say flashing towards a dark backdrop.
A non-reflective dark backdrop.
Non-reflective backdrop.
Non-reflective backdrop. Now it's clear. Thank you all.
That's perfect.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Is everyone comfortable with all the items that Jonathan read off?
That's my motion.
Oh, I see, okay. That's what you want to make the motion?
Yes.
Okay, hold on a second.
You want my
Yes.
preamble?
Yes.
I'd like for you to read your thing one more time, Karen, and see if
Preamble?
we're all good
Okay.
with that.
With the understanding that the current venue's operation is not compatible with the adjacent neighborhood due to the event noise issues, it is recommended that the city council and the city manager be open to an early conclusion to the tenant's lease.
So,
That's good.
Now, is that in the motion?
No,
No, it's
that's,
just a
it's
note.
just a,
Yeah, it's
the
a
record.
it
no.
would be part
Okay.
of the motion to send that,
As a note.
it's a recommendation.
Okay.
that recommendation
Thank you.
forward. If you want to make the recommendation, or the motion, I'm going to recommend you
Okay.
read from 1 and 2, and then when you get to 2, as amended by Jonathan, and have Jonathan reread it into the record.
Okay.
Is that necessary? Jonathan?
Ask the city attorney, is the rereading of all those individual points necessary?
I think it was clear, but if the commission is not clear on all the points, it's fine to reread it.
I
think it's
think it was
Okay,
clear.
that's
I think it was
fine.
clear.
I just want to make sure for the record, it's, well, you have it in writing, so you can make sure it gets into the minutes correctly.
Correct. And then I would just ask that if Commissioner Prescott Leffler wouldn't mind reading her portion once more, and since she has it written out, provide that to me, and I'll
Yeah.
capture that exact wording.
With the understanding that the current venue's operation is not compatible with the adjacent neighborhood due to the event noise issues, it is recommended that the city council and the city manager be open to an early conclusion to the tenant's lease.
And can you give that to Jonathan?
Yes, it's
Okay, so
messy
that,
here, but I'll give it to you.
hopefully you will incorporate that into
Yeah.
your motion. Okay.
So I move that we determine the project is categorically exempt from the requirements of the CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15301, class 1 existing facilities, and that we adopt PC 24-016, approving CUP 24-128, Ole Hansen Beach Club private events, subject to the attached conditions of approval, including the revisions as specified by Jonathan Lightfoot, and also including we send a recommendation as written by Commissioner Prescott Loeffler to the city manager and city council.
Great.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner McCann, and it is seconded by Chair Pro Tem Camp. Is everyone clear on the motion? Is there any discussion? You're good? And you're good? Okay. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you for your patience and being here tonight and listening to all our concerns and the residents as well. Okay. That concludes our public hearings for the night. Let me get back to our agenda. Item 9 is next on the agenda. It's new business. We don't have any. Item 10 is old business. We don't have any. So that leads us to item 11, reports of commissioners and staff. Jonathan, did you have reports that you'd like to provide?
Yeah, I just wanted to provide one update on an item. We did receive an appeal of the hotel approval on Del Mar. So that will be agendized for the council de novo hearing on October 15th.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to share?
Not tonight.
Okay. Commission reports, Chair Pro Tem Camp.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I'm going to be out 3 weeks in October. Well, 2 weeks, but I'm going to miss potentially, do we have any idea when the October meetings?
Yeah, I will be out a week in October as well. I'm not,
It's like the 2nd and the 16th.
2nd and the 16th.
Okay, I'll be here for the 2nd, but not the 16th.
Yeah, I will let you know, Jonathan, the week I'm out of town in October. I don't recall it at the moment. What were the two meetings? The,
October 2nd and
goodness.
16th are the
Sorry?
dates. October 2nd and 16th are the
16th?
dates.
Okay,
not-
gotcha. All right. That's okay. Are there any other reports from anyone else?
I won't be here at the next meeting on the 18th.
That's right, you mentioned that before.
Since we're all reporting that, I will not be October 2nd. I won't be at that meeting.
Okay.
I got you covered.
Thank you, I got you on the 16th.
Okay, anything else?
Yeah.
I'm going to move that we adjourn tonight to the next regular meeting of the Planning Commission scheduled for Wednesday, September 18th, 2024 at 5 p.m., Jonathan?
Correct, yes.
Okay? To be held at the San Clemente City Hall Council Chambers here at City Hall. Seconded
Second.
by Chair Pro Tem Camp. Any discussion on to adjourn? And all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, we stand adjourned. Thank you for everybody's participation tonight.